Chapter 14:11. Su Fengnian felt a headache coming on. It's hard to say what the world will look like in the future, but after Huang Sanjia transferred the fate of the 8 countries to Jianghu, the current Jianghu is like a bamboo forest. It's a year of spring, but soon, the bamboo will bloom. Once it dies, a large area will die. Everything within a radius of dozens or even hundreds of miles will die. Moreover, there won't be any bumper harvests in the future. It'll all be a small year. The more it's like this, the more outstanding my 3 disciples, Yu Dilong, Wang Sheng, and Lu Yunzhang, will be. Especially Yu Dilong, who has the best opportunities and the highest achievements. When the time comes, he'll definitely stand alone. Perhaps he'll be the only immortal on Earth in the 100 years after my generation. Therefore, whether he has a family or not will make a big difference. Pei Nanwei smiled. That's why you're willing to come here and have a meal. It's really hard for you, the king of Biyao, to worry about the country, its people, and the world while fighting against the Beimang barbarians. Moreover, you're even scheming against your own disciple. Aren't you tired? Su Fengnian said self-deprecatingly, it's fine to worry about the country and its people. I really don't have that kind of free time. In the end, I just want to protect the family business that Su Xiao passed to me. This is my bottom line. It's even better if I can do something good above my bottom line. If I can't do it, I won't force myself. However, I really don't want to add fuel to the fire or kick someone when they're down. As for the scheming you mentioned? Perhaps. There's no other way. When I see Yu Dilong, it's hard not to think of that Wang Xianji. He, Huang Longsher, and Zhang Julu are 3 people I hated in my early years, but in the end, I can't help but admire. Pei Nanwei suddenly said, I just heard the military news from the mouth of the gourd. It said that Crouching Bao City and Luanha City were conquered by the Beimang barbarians. I thought you'd send a spy to tell me to move back to Mount Qingliang. These 2 days, people in Bishan City have been saying that you personally led troops to the mouth of the gourd and killed many barbarians. Does that mean I don't have to go to Liangzhou anymore? Su Fengnian smiled and said, if you don't like it, you don't have to go back. Also, to tell you the truth, if the Beimang army really goes south, Yuzhou will be the last of the 4 provinces in Biyao. Pei Nanwei asked in confusion, later than Liangzhou? Su Fengnian nodded and said, the geographical situation dictates it. For example, Yuzhou is of little value and extremely difficult to conquer. Liuzhou was just an appetizer. It tasted spicy, but Beimang could finish it if he gritted his teeth. Lingzhou was a plate of delicacies, but it was a little far away, and the barbarians couldn't reach it with their chopsticks. Therefore, the main battlefield can only be in Liangzhou. The cities will attack and defend, and the light cavalry of both sides will wait for an opportunity to move. Even the first large-scale battle between heavy cavalry in history can happen. Pei Nanwei said softly, Biyao Road is still too small, and there aren't enough people. Su Fengnian was a little helpless. What do you think? Back then, when Li Yang was controlling the various vassal towns, he had a lot of reference to Sun Ping's Quadi Ji and Xia Guaning's Hongjianian County map. The territories of the various vassal kings, how many soldiers Su Zhao's Biyao Road could support, and how many soldiers Zhao Bing's Nanjiang could support, were all calculated and deduced countless times. Since the middle of Yonghui's reign, all kinds of restrictions and support for Biyao Road were built on the foundation of Beimang using Biyao as the entry point to the south. Yuan Benshi was betting on the current situation. As for Zhao Bing's Nanjiang, it was used to target West Chu's re-establishment of Guangling Road. Otherwise, how could Li Yang still be so calm and composed after Yang Shenxing and Yan Zhenxuan's defeat? Zhao Dan even had the leisure to take Gu Jiantang to Jizhou to see the scenery before his death, instead of going to the southern part of the capital to boost the army's morale. He also didn't rush the 2 Liao border armies to the south. The reason was very simple. In Zhao Dun's eyes, the re-establishment of West Chu wasn't a big deal that would harm the country's vitality. What he wanted to do was to control the situation and weaken the separatist forces of all the vassal kings outside Biyao Road. He wasn't afraid of losing many battles in the early stages. On the contrary, he was afraid of Yang Shenxing. Yan Jinshuan won consecutive battles at the beginning, causing the Duke of Guangling, Zhao Yi, the Duke of Huainan, and the King of Jing'an, Zhao Sun, to have nothing to do with them. Otherwise, why do you think Yan Jinshuan, who was familiar with military affairs, would rush south to help Yang Shenxing? How could Lu Xingxiang not see the risks? After the war, why didn't anyone from the Ministry of War in the capital, including Lu Xingxiang, get punished? Pei Nanwei said worriedly, what if Zhao Bing, the Duke of Yanqi, doesn't send troops? Bei Mang's million-strong army is pressuring the border. Is the imperial court really not afraid of being attacked from the front and rear? When the time comes, can Gu Jiantang's Tu Liao defend Tai and city alone? Su Fengnian smiled and said softly, you're underestimating Zhao Dun and those famous ministers of Spring of Eternal Hui. Vassal towns, eunuchs, relatives, civil officials, and local military generals have always been the 5 great evils of history. You might as well recall the situation of the Liang imperial court in the past 20 years, and the result of West Chu's re-establishment. Pei Nanwei said tirelessly, eunuchs meddling in politics didn't exist when the 2 Zhao emperors were alive, and there won't be any in the future. It's the same with the matter of relatives. If we're talking about party struggles, during the reign of Eternal Hui, there was Zhang Julu, who didn't amount to much. Now that Zhang Lu and Gu Lu have collapsed, although I don't know what will happen if someone else sits on the dragon throne, I know that before Zhao Dun died, he invited the Grand Chancellor of Shangyin Academy, Qi Yanglong, to Tai and City to be the appointed minister, to help the new emperor stabilize the court. As for the local military generals, after the collapse of Gu Lu, and with the example of Yang Shenxing and Yan Jinshuan, the 2 old generals, everyone felt insecure. In addition, Gu Jiantang made concessions everywhere. Many military generals were thankful to be able to protect themselves. They really didn't have the heart to challenge the imperial court. Among the old vassal kings, the Duke of Huainan, Zhao Ying, died. The Duke of Jiaodong, Zhao Sui, was suppressed by Gu Jiantang to the point that he had difficulty breathing. As for Qingzhou, in order to show his loyalty, that person seems to have sacrificed thousands of elite cavalry, right? Then, Beiliang will fight to the death with Bei Mang. The most powerful Duke of Guangling, Zhao Yi, is restrained by West Chu, and it's inevitable that he will be injured. In addition, you said that the Duke of Yan, Zhao Bing, will soon be ordered to go north. Pei Nanwei reached out to stroke the hair on her forehead and smiled, as expected of the Spring of Eternal Hui. Su Fengnian sighed, Qi Yanglong didn't disappoint. The new imperial court did a lot of things well. They made an exception for the meritorious generals and added 6 academicians to the civil officials. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Su Fengnian lowered his head slightly and looked at the rainwater falling on the limestone floor in the alley and then disappearing. Zhang Julu is dead. Other than some hidden things, there won't be any changes. However, many of the marks that he and Zhang Julu left in the Liang dynasty will soon fade and then disappear without a trace. The Spring of Eternal Hui, written by Zhang Julu, is a book that can be flipped over at will. This is the most powerful part of the Liang dynasty. It looks like wind is blowing in all directions, but it's actually as stable as Mount Tai. In the end, it's because Zhao Dun left behind a lot of assets for the current emperor. The 2 walked slowly. There was still some distance before they reached the Yamen of Bishan district. Pei Nanwei wanted to say something but stopped. Su Fengnian turned to look at her and smiled, if you want to ask, then ask. Pei Nanwei looked at him, don't you know what I want to ask? Su Fengnian closed his oil paper umbrella and suddenly squeezed under her umbrella. Pei Nanwei didn't show any strange expression. She thought that if the husband and wife went to the Yamen to quarrel and ask for money, it might be inappropriate for them to hold their own umbrellas. Their momentum would be weaker. Su Fengnian took the umbrella from her hand and walked side by side on the wheeled street after turning out of the alley. When I was on the way to the Shenwu city with Wudang Wang Xiaoping, I wasn't sure if I could survive under the hands of Cat Man Han Xingxian, so I told Wang Xiaoping some things from my heart. My father, Su Shao, has never been a narrow-minded person. He said that Beiliang Road and Liang Road are one family. It's okay to quarrel behind closed doors. If we can't live under the same roof, then we can move out and set up our own house next door. We won't interact with each other for the rest of our lives. But if others feel that they can take advantage of this opportunity and come to his house to show off, then Su Xiao doesn't mind slapping them in the face. It's that simple. Of course, Su Xiao also has a bottom line, which is me, his son, who is going to inherit his family business. As long as I don't die, even if the process of inheriting the family business is bumpy and not smooth, Su Xiao can endure it. If I die in the hands of the imperial court, then he won't care about Biyao anymore. He will definitely lead the 300,000 Biyao frontier army and fight all the way to Tai and city. In the past, when I traveled Jianghu with old Huang, the empress at that time, now Empress Dowager Zhaoji, personally mobilized the imperial bodyguards to help me block a disaster. Obviously, as a woman, she can rely on her intuition to grasp Su Xiao's thoughts. Su Fengnian suddenly laughed to himself and said, "As for me, in the past, when I was in the capital, I boasted that I would guard the country for the people of the Central Plains. It wasn't true, but it wasn't a lie either. In any case, I have to help Su Xiao guard Biyao. Isn't that the same as guarding the northwest door for the people of the Central Plains? It's the same thing, but we have different intentions." The corners of Pei Nanwei's mouth gently curved up. Su Fengnian looked at the yamen not far ahead and said softly, "That old woman in Beimeng once said in front of everyone from the two dynasties that she is willing to rule the world together with Su Xiao. Doesn't it sound very heroic?" Pei Nanwei nodded and said, "Yes." Su Fengnian laughed and said, "This is a needle hidden in the silk floss." In the past, Su Xiao refused to rule by drawing rivers, and a group of generals who were unwilling to accept this left. If you say that this was Su Xiao's own doing. Later on, the imperial court allowed the Su family to ride their armored horses into Jianghu and use their blades against the people of the Wulin. How many low-level soldiers left? You definitely wouldn't be able to guess that it was more than 20,000. Not one of them wasn't an elite veteran who had experienced hundreds of battles. If Su Xiao was willing to accept the old woman in Beimeng's suggestion, how many people do you think would have left? Su Fengnian stretched out a hand and twirled it. At least 100,000. Pei Nanwei suddenly understood and said, "So that's how it is." Chapter 14:12. Su Fengnian narrowed his eyes. During that snowstorm, Su Xiao met with that old woman outside the pass. Tuoba Bodhisattva and I each acted as coachmen. In the end, we parted on bad terms. However, if you think that Su Xiao didn't agree because he felt that Beiyao's army's morale would drop, then you're underestimating my father and Empress Murong too much. She privately promised Su Xiao and proposed a condition. You won't be able to guess it even if you beat me to death. Pei Nanwei casually said, "Isn't it that after we succeed, Su Xiao will be old and can only retire, but Su Fengnian can be the master of the Central Plains?" Su Fengnian was stunned. He couldn't help but curse. His face was full of shock as he said, "You can guess that?" Pei Nanwei rolled her eyes at him. "I couldn't guess it at first, but since you said it like that, I just can't believe it. Besides, Zhao Ji is a woman, and so am I. Can't I guess Empress Murong's thoughts?" Su Fengnian praised from the bottom of his heart, "Amazing." Pei Nanwei suddenly said, "I'm not cold." Su Fengnian looked confused. Pei Nanwei twitched the corner of her mouth. "You're really afraid that I'll be cold and get splashed by the rain on my shoulder? Why don't you just turn the umbrella sideways to me? Aren't you being too sincere? Take your hand away." Su Fengnian resentfully withdrew his hand from Pei Nanwei's shoulder. The two of them walked through the county yaman's gate. Su Fengnian closed the umbrella. County Magistrate Feng Guan and County Prime Ministers Wu Jing both lived behind the yamen. Su Fengnian, who was nominally the third in command of the county yamen, should also have a place. However, Feng Guan bullied him because he was young, ignorant, and had no foundation, and pushed him out. When they entered the mountain to suppress the bandits, they actually didn't do anything. It was only because Feng Guan, who was the first in command, got an above-average grade in the year-end evaluation. Zhu Jing shared the leftovers. County Magistrate Bai Shank, who was a scholar going to Liang, successfully transferred to the Yuzhou army. As the two of them passed through the yamen, the Su officials of the 6th branch who were still on duty greeted them warmly. They had a good impression of Su Qi, the young registrar who had been missing for a long time and was unable to keep his seat. However, within their warm expressions, there was also a hint of playfulness in their eyes, both pity and schadenfreude. Su Fengnian relied on these clues to know what was going on. Although Registrar Su was about to pack up and leave, Feng Guan was not too unreasonable when he learned that this person had come to visit. After all, he was the main culprit. Otherwise, Su Qi would not have to leave Bishan County so quickly. In Yozhou's old calendar, not to mention a year and a half, how many disciples of the general class who worked in the yamen to make money could not be seen for years? Who told Su Qi, a disciple of a low-class general class, to not have a backer and to not understand the current situation and loiter around? Who in Yuzhou dared to not take the roll call seriously? It was said that in Lingzhou, under the reorganization of the provincial governor of the granary, a large number of disciples of noble families who didn't do proper work were taught a lesson. Feng Guan sat in the study and was playing with two new good items, the bamboo-carved Shaoshi Taisher paperweight and the bamboo yellow Lingji jade Rui Rui that was said to be made by the imperial family of the old southern Tang. After hearing the servant's report, he originally wanted to get up and go outside the study to deal with the matter. He was not going to let Su Qi drink a sip of hot tea. However, when the servant considerately mentioned that Registrar Su's wife was also coming along, the county magistrate understood. He put his butt back on the chair and said that he would meet the guest in the study and prepare tea. Feng Guan did not walk to the door of the study to welcome him. Then, the county magistrate saw the young man, who was supposed to be full of flattery, directly cross the threshold. He also did not take the initiative to greet him. What he did next was even more absurd. He actually had his wife, who was supposed to be a living widow, sit on the chair while he leaned against the chair. He asked, if I remember correctly, the new registrar and county magistrate are both scholars from Beiliang. They are called Yang Gongshou and Zhu Ying, respectively. Previously, they were both students of Green Deer Cave Academy. Now, there is the great Confucian scholar Huang Chang and others in charge of reviewing the essays of Beiliang scholars. That Yang Gongshou was the champion of a half-year review in Yuzhou. Let's not talk about him. How about Zhu Ying? Feng Guan was still holding the exquisite bamboo carving in one hand and his other hand was still in the posture of inviting someone to drink tea. He was at a loss. For a moment, he didn't dare to look directly at the young man in front of him. Feng Guan felt that it was strange. Where did this kid get this authority from? Feng Guan did not even feel this kind of pressure from the governor of Yanji County, Hong Shandong. Feng Guan, who felt that he had lost all face, put down the bamboo rui ornament and drank a mouthful of tea to moisten his throat. Using the official voice that he had cultivated for many years, he said, Su Qi. Su Fengnian smiled and said, my name is Su Fengnian. Feng Guan was stunned for a moment. He sneered and said, I am Zhang Julu. Feng Guan suddenly realized that the Grand Secretary was already dead. He flew into a rage out of humiliation. He slapped the table and said, Su Qi, do you believe that I can arrest you and throw you into prison just because of your shameful words? Pei Nanwei reached out 2 fingers and secretly pinched Su Fengnian's waist. She also imitated the county magistrate's tone. Let's talk business. Su Fengnian snapped his fingers. Then, Feng Guan discovered that a gust of cold wind had appeared beside him. A black-clothed brawny man with a rigid expression was standing there. He took out a simple bronze, general's talisman, from his bosom and held it in front of Feng Guan's eyes. Feng Guan had heard that the high-ranking officers of the border army all had a general's talisman. It did not need to be used to mobilize troops. It only had one use, and that was on the battlefield. If the general died in battle, it would be handed over to the deputy general to command. If the deputy general died in battle, it would be handed over to the lieutenant general. If the lieutenant general died in battle, it would be handed over to the lieutenant general. However, Feng Guan was not sure if this was the general's talisman. Besides, even if he was beaten to death, he did not believe that Su Qi was some king of Biyao. As a result, Feng Guan suddenly felt a surge of heroic spirit. He loudly reprimanded, "Su Qi, you are impudent. Do you really think this official is easy to fool?" The earthly branch death warrior who had followed Su Shao for many years glanced at his new master. Su Fengnian waved his hand, and this expressionless figure disappeared in a flash. Feng Guan felt his hair stand on end. Su Fengnian did not know whether to laugh or cry. He reached out to grab two of Pei Nanwei's fingers, and the latter struggled to pull them away. Su Fengnian said helplessly, "Let's not talk about other things first. Give me your salary for the next few months. I'm waiting to be cooked at home." Feng Guan leaned back in his chair. "If you have something to say, we can talk it out. Killing people to silence them is not something I can do. There are hundreds of brocade cavalry under my rule in Bishan district." Rather than believing that this former secretary was some Su Fengnian, he was more inclined to believe that this fellow was a Beimang spy who had infiltrated Yuzhou. Pei Nanwei stretched out a hand and said calmly, "Pay up. 24 taels and 7 coins. Feng Guan's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He forced a smile and said, "These 2 bamboo carvings were made by famous craftsmen in the spring and autumn period. They can be sold for at least 100 taels of silver. You can take them." Pei Nanwei sneered, "Use them to light a fire? Enough? Besides, it's too dirty to use your hands. I want the silver." Feng Guan cursed angrily in his heart. He had only played with these 2 bamboo carvings. How was it dirty? Then did she not use the real money? She was really a woman with long hair and short knowledge. She was born with such a femme fatale appearance in vain. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "County magistrate, then I'll go to the household to get my salary." Feng Guan's legs were actually trembling, but he still pretended to be calm and waved his hand. He thought that as soon as the couple left, he would immediately have the torture room and the bailiffs arrest them. After Su Fengnian walked out of the study, he picked up the 2 oil paper umbrellas at the door. Pei Nanwei asked, "You're going to ask for your salary like this?" Su Fengnian smiled and said, "I'm just afraid that I won't be able to reason with him. Besides, with his eyes wandering around your body, I'm afraid that before I can say anything, I won't be able to resist slapping him to death." Slapping Feng Guan to death is actually not bad. Anyone can be this kind of official. It's just right to make room for Yang Gongshou and Zhu Ying. Pei Nanwei's expression was a bit strange. Su Fengnian received his salary from the Yamen office in the front yard. Naturally, Su Li didn't dare to show any attitude to the secretary who had the county magistrate's imperial edict. When they walked out of the Yamen, they found that the rain had stopped. Su Fengnian softly said, "That Yang Gongshou is nothing. He only knows how to write some beautiful essays that are not supported by any spiritual energy." Zhu Ying, on the other hand, is not famous in the academy at the foot of the Green Deer Mountain, but she has a lot of critical essays on current affairs, all of which are placed on Fu Shui's desk. In the end, even my heir Jia was alarmed. She specially wrote a letter to me saying that this person is very useful. It's just that compared to Chen Shiliang and Su Beiji, she is too sharp, stubborn, and unforgiving. Several times, she even forced Huang Chang to invite a great scholar to give a lecture. Pei Nanwei said with a cold face, that Yang Gongshou is not a good person. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "I knew it. Is this person pestering you? Fu Shui's spy hasn't told me about this. Is it something that happened recently?" Chapter 14-13. There was no anger on Pei Nanwei's face. "Last time when I went to the Yamen to collect my debt, this person came to Bishan County to take up his post. He's probably waiting for the prefectural governor's official approval and has nothing better to do. Every time I go out to buy something, he'll appear. At least he still has the face of a scholar. He won't come near me and will just recite poems from a distance. His level might be on par with yours in the past." Su Fengnian couldn't help but laugh. "How is that possible? When I bought poems from Beiyang scholars, they were all expensive and the content was good. Pei Nanwei and Su Fengnian were about to turn into an alley when 4 or 5 ruffians, who seemed to be waiting for them, surrounded them with smiles on their faces. Pei Nanwei glanced at Su Fengnian. The latter frowned and muttered to himself, "Hasn't Bishan County experienced the power of the brocade cavalry? How can someone have the guts to cause trouble at a time like this?" Very quickly, the answer came to light. In the time it took for the ruffians to surround them, a hero came to save the damsel in distress. Not far behind Su Fengnian and Pei Nanwei, a man in white clothes and carrying a sword appeared. He was very handsome and elegant, and his posture was very elegant. He also had a sword at his side, which seemed to be worth a lot. When he saw Su Fengnian beside Pei Nanwei, a trace of sadness and disappointment flashed across his eyes. But very quickly, this emotion turned into passion and endless fighting spirit. He didn't even need to use his sword. His sword moved like a swimming dragon. With a light shout, he stepped forward quickly and sent out a palm strike from 7 or 8 steps away. Immediately, one of the ruffians seemed to be swept away by the powerful palm strike. His feet left the ground and he crashed into the wall of the alley. The white-clothed swordsman sent out another palm strike. Another ruffian's body spun several times before he fell to the ground, moaning in pain. The corner of Pei Nanwei's mouth twitched. She turned her head away, refusing to look at this idiot. Su Fengnian stretched out his fingers to pinch her chin and gently turned her head back. He held back his laughter and said, "You are a hero who draws his sword to help when he sees injustice on the road. It's also very hard for you, okay? You should at least finish watching the show." The white-clothed swordsman was busy showing off his dense inner strength and peerless martial arts, so he did not see this scene. Otherwise, he would have probably spat out blood. One palm after another, he beat the group of ruffians until they were scared witless. Some even struggled to get up and rush toward the white-clothed swordsman. But before they could even touch the corner of the swordsman's clothes, they were swept away by the swift and fierce wind from his palms. They flew sideways, backward, and spun away in all kinds of wonderful poses. Su Fengnian turned his head and explained to Pei Nanwei in a low voice, "When I did this kind of thing in the past, I spent more than 200 taels. Because at the beginning, I had the imperial bodyguards in the palace pretend to be ruffians. It was too fake. It was my first time doing this, and I had no experience." Those 7 or 8 imperial bodyguards were clearly flirting with the girl, but when they opened their mouths, it was as if they were going to kill her whole family. The girl was so scared that she almost fainted. She cried and said don't kill her, and she would do anything. In the end, I had no choice but to explain. Guess what? That delicate and pretty girl was not shy at all. She directly asked me if I was married, and the result scared me. I was laughed at by Li Hanlin and the others for half a year. After that, I hired ruffians from the marketplace to act in this kind of show. In advance, we had to agree on how to fight. This kind of wind from the palm strike style was easy to deal with as the price was low. If we used knives, people would have to raise the price. But at that time, I gave money according to my mood. I estimated that no matter how stingy this brother was, he would have spent at least 20 or 30 taels. Yu Dilong and Lu Yunzhang, who were squatting at the entrance of the alley, were also dumbfounded. When the swordsman, who was sweating profusely from just using his palms, finally finished his work, those ruffians followed the rules and shouted things like, "Young swordsman, spare our lives," and "Young swordsman's martial arts are amazing." Then, they supported each other and left. Pei Nanwei covered her mouth and laughed. Because in her ears, Su Fengnian had already said these words before them. The former head of Baoyang's scourge was full of pride. "How is it? It's all the same, right? I'm the founder of this kind of thing. Back in the day, who knows how many hedonistic sons of rich parents in Liangzhou and Lingzhou learned from me." The white-clothed swordsman, whose back was facing the two, hurriedly took a few deep breaths. When his breathing stabilized, he turned around with a smile and walked towards Su Fengnian and Pei Nanwei. Just as he was about to speak, 2 troublemakers appeared out of nowhere. The taller one of them shouted at the eyesore next to Miss Pei, "Master, Mistress, senior brother, and I will find an inn to stay in. Otherwise, we won't be able to sleep on the same bed. Let's go. Su Fengnian saw the two brats run away like a wisp of smoke. His expression was somewhat awkward. Pei Nanwei sneered, "You've taken in a good disciple." The white-clothed swordsman in front of them was the newly appointed registrar of Bishan County, Yang Gongshou. When he saw that Su Qi standing next to the woman he admired, his heart was broken. He had long heard of the beauty of the Rouge woman. Something like, if you marry a wife, you should marry a woman from Lingzhou. If you take a concubine, you should take a Rouge woman. At first, he thought it was just some old lecherous official's dirty talk. However, when he saw the woman who appeared in the yamen, his soul left his body. Later, when he heard that she was already married, he had a painful battle between heaven and man. In the end, he couldn't control himself. Yang Gongshou didn't really want to do anything. He just wanted to find an opportunity to appear in front of her. Later, when he saw that his talent in poetry was useless, he felt that his path might have been wrong. Since Beiliang had a fierce culture, perhaps she liked the path of a great hero. Thus, this happened. Su Fengnian reached out and grabbed Pei Nanwei's slender waist. He smiled and said, "This great hero must be a master in Jianghu. Do you have a thunderous nickname?" Yang Gongshou opened his mouth slightly. He really forgot about this. However, he did have talent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become so famous in Green Deer Cave Academy. He cupped his fists and smiled, "I am Yang Gongshou. People in Jianghu call me the Sword of Poetry." Not far away, a young scholar clapped his hands and walked over. He laughed and said, "Brother Wenfu, when we climbed Green Deer Mountain, we were already panting like a cow halfway up the mountain. I don't know how you managed to achieve great success today. Could it be that you've been possessed by the heavens?" Yang Gongshou was exposed. He wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. Luckily, Miss Pei had already left with that person. Yang Gongshou's face was red. In the end, he couldn't say anything vicious. He just snorted coldly. That scholar stood with Yang Gongshou. He looked at the two people's backs as they walked into the alley. He laughed softly and said, "A fair and graceful lady is a good match for a gentleman. Brother Wenfu, you and I didn't see eye to eye before. However, after today, your dislike for me has increased greatly. I actually have some good feelings for you." Yang Gongshou flung his sleeves and walked toward the county yamen in large strides. That person smiled and shook his head. "Yang Gongshou, oh Yang Gongshou. Do you really think those two people couldn't see through your clumsy tricks? I'm saving you from being treated like a monkey." Walking in the alley, Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Maybe that Yang Gongshou won't appreciate it and will only think that Zhu Ying is undermining him." Pei Nanwei, who had once been on the Rouge Review board, didn't have any ripples in her heart towards this farce. She said, "That Zhu Ying shouldn't be suitable for officialdom, right?" Su Fengnian sighed softly and said, "If it was in Liang, unless there was a Bo Lu who had a unique insight and was tolerant of people, Zhu Ying shouldn't be able to make a name for himself. There is one thing that is very bad about being a scholar." Pei Nanwei asked, "Being swayed by emotions?" Su Fengnian nodded. "Scholars have more feelings than ordinary people. The more they read and know, the more they know about history, and inevitably, their thoughts become heavier. The more talented they are, the weaker their sense of propriety is. They don't like to control the situation. To be precise, it's disdain. They are too lazy to feign civility with people and things. When looking at people and doing things, it's easy to be black and white. That's what you call being swayed by emotions. That's why those literary heroes in history often didn't become officials. This kind of strange phenomenon can't be explained just by having high standards but low ability. Fortunately, this doesn't matter to them. Emperors, generals, and ministers are all just a handful of soil. Only drinkers and poets leave their names behind. Drowning their sorrows in wine and writing famous poems, isn't that great? Thousands of years later, it's naturally easier for people to remember them than those emperors, generals, ministers, and high-ranking officials. The two returned to the courtyard. Pei Nanwei carried 2 small wooden stools and placed them under the eaves. She looked at him, who was sitting quietly beside her. She said, "It's hard to imagine that you're His Royal Highness, the one who killed people in the reed marsh." He didn't say anything. She casually asked, "I heard the people on the street say that there's a turning point in Guangling Road. West Chu has been defeated. Do you think Chao Chongqing will make a move? Or wait until the king of Yan goes north?" He shook his head. The king of Guangling should be going to accompany the king of Huainan soon. Only then will the king of Yan's army confront Chao Chongqing. She asked, "You're willing to come this time and say so much? Are you saying your last words?" He didn't say anything again. The two were silent for a long time. In the night, there wasn't much to see. She looked at the sky and finally said, "It's rare for a powerful man to treat a woman like a person, right?" He said softly, "Maybe not a lot, but definitely not a few. It's just that your luck isn't too good and you haven't met one." Pei Nanwei rested her chin on her knees and murmured, "But, it's not good to not treat a woman like a woman all year long, right?" After saying this, she stood up and walked into the room. Her figure was graceful. Chapter 14:14. After dawn, Yu Dilong and Lu Yunzhang left the inn on Luan Luo Street and came to the entrance of the courtyard. They squatted on the left and right like 2 door gods. Waiting was really boring. Lu Yunzhang yawned and patted his mouth. He asked casually, "Earthworm Yu, do you know what's the most important thing after spring this year?" Yu Dilong was wondering if his junior sister, Wang Sheng, was used to living with the white fox face. He wondered if she had found 1 or 2 brand new famous swords in Beimang and if she had fought with anyone. He didn't hear what Lu Yunzhang, who often claimed to be the loudspeaker of the pugilistic world, was saying. After all, nothing good could come out of Lu Yunzhang's mouth. Yu Dilong didn't understand what Wang Sheng meant. Lu Yunzhang was also used to Yu Dilong's absent-mindedness, so he said to himself, in the past, there were a total of 7 reviews for the civil and military reviews, general reviews, and rouge reviews. They would put the military reviews as the finale and put the rouge reviews at the end. This time, the auspicious talisman review, which was jointly reviewed by Nailan Yusi and Xia Guinying, is different. It seems to pay special attention to the civil and military reviews. They actually put the military reviews at the front. Yu Dilong replied, "Oh." Lu Yunzhang asked curiously, "Aren't you curious about our master's ranking on the martial arts review?" Yu Dilong said casually, "That's not fair. Doing this when master is seriously injured. If master's ranking isn't good, I'll find trouble with them after Bailiang defeats the Beimang barbarians and I've learned martial arts." Lu Yunzhang rolled his eyes and said, "This year, there are a total of 14 people on the martial arts rankings. The 4 grandmasters and the top 10 experts have been reintroduced. Master, Tuoba Bodhisattva, Dong Tai, and Chao Chongqing are known as the world's 4 grandmasters. Next is the top 10 experts. It's said that there's no ranking. Li Yang has Chen Jibao, Su Yanbing, Gu Jiantang, Mount Hui Xianyuan Qingfeng, and the head of the Wu family's sword tomb. Beimang has Huyan Daguan, Luo Yang, Hong Jingyan, Murong Baoding, and Deng Mao. Yu Dilong frowned. How come that white fox face, the tall Guanyin sect master and the white-browed old man who likes to eat swords are not on the list? I think they're all pretty good. Lu Yunchang joked, "In the future, when you find Xia Guinying and Nailan Yusi, ask them yourself." How would I know why? Yu Dilong nodded his head seriously. Lu Yunzhang said in surprise, "Are you really going?" Yu Dilong turned to look at him and asked, "Do you know what the Sihyuan Antipei mentioned is?" Lu Yunzhang nodded and said, "There are many such courtyards in the Central Plains. They are divided into multiple entrances and exits. Many rich people's mansions are quadrangles." Yu Dilong asked in a low voice, "That would cost a lot of silver, right?" Lu Yunzhang curled his lips and said, "There's only one street in the entire county city, Jade Mountain. If you spend a few taels of silver, you can get it for 40 to 50 taels at most." Yu Dilong said angrily, 45 taels is not enough?" Lu Yunzhang, who was carrying the great frost saber on his back, picked his earwax. You're the only one who's short-sighted. As our master's disciple, isn't it easy for you to ask for a courtyard in Mount Qingliang? That place is valuable. Even 10,000 taels of gold can't buy it. Look at how many officials and generals are in Beiliang. Isn't only Deputy Administrator Song Dongming the only one who can have a residence in Mount Qingliang? Yu Dilong sneered, what do you know? Lu Yunzhang retorted, you don't even know shit. Yu Dilong reached out to touch the hilt of his cold saber. Lu Yunzhang suddenly stood up, Yu Dilong, do you really think I'm afraid of you? My great frost saber has long been thirsty for blood. At this moment, Su Fengnian held his waist with one hand and opened the door with the other. When he saw his two disciples at the door at daggers drawn, he said in annoyance, if you want to fight, get lost and fight further away. Yu Dilong looked at his master's complexion and said with guilt and horror, Master, why are you injured again? Could it be that there were Beimang assassins last night? Su Fengnian's expression was strange, and Lu Yunzhang's smile was even stranger. This fellow fawningly said, Master, I'll help you get on the horse later. Don't sprain your waist again. Su Fengnian kicked Lu Yunzhang away from the doorsteps, take the horse and set off for the Liangzhou Protectorate. Yu Dilong asked cautiously, Master, are you really okay? Su Fengnian put on a stern face and said in all seriousness, there are some defeats that can't be recovered after losing. The older a man is, the more this is the case. Yu Dilong thought carefully, Master is already a grandmaster. It seems the enemy is very powerful. By the way, Master, is Auntie Pei all right? Su Fengnian was about to speak when Lu Yunzhang shouted, Auntie Pei, let's go with Master. Master's waist can't take it anymore. It's difficult for him to get on the horse. Lu Yunzhang mounted his horse and galloped away. Su Fengnian and Yu Dilong mounted their horses one after another. Su Fengnian said with a fake smile, Yu Dilong, go and beat up your junior brother. Yu Dilong clenched his right fist with his left hand and rubbed it fiercely. His face was filled with killing intent. Then, the child asked, Master, what's the reason? Su Fengnian asked, does eldest senior brother need a reason to beat up youngest junior brother? Yu Dilong spurred his horse and chased after Lu Yunzhang. Su Fengnian looked at the child's back and chuckled, just like how you miss Wang Sheng. There's no need for a reason. Su Fengnian took a deep breath and looked back at the courtyard. Let's go. The word love does not know where it begins or where it rests. Does not know where it begins or how it is resolved. Does not know where it ends. From the clan that lived in luxury, to Xiangfan City in Qingzhou, to northern Liang, where the sky was higher than the central plains. He lived by the shore of Tidehark Lake on Mount Qingliang, and finally came to a poor little county in Yanji County. Like a rootless and weak reed, Pei Nanwei had never felt so at ease even though she had to deal with daily necessities such as rice, oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, and tea. Princess Liang's Rouge Rating, Princess Liang's Rouge Rating, and Madame Liang's Rouge Rating. She lazily got out of bed and made breakfast as usual. Last time, she was busy the whole afternoon for the New Year's Eve dinner. She made 8 or 9 dishes and then placed 2 sets of bowls and chopsticks on the table. She sat at the table and thought about the vegetable garden in the corner and the slightly larger vegetable garden in the back of the courtyard. When would there be a harvest? She thought that after breakfast, she would open the chicken coop and see if there would be a surprise. She thought about the more than 20 taels of silver she got from the county government last night and the more than 30 taels of silver she saved before. According to the price of the masons and carpenters in Bishan County, she could build a decent small courtyard house. Unfortunately, the world in Yuzhou was not peaceful now. If it was last year, she could save a lot of money. Pei Nanwei looked around. Last year, she bought a lot of things for the New Year's Eve. At that time, she was distressed and secretly complained that she shouldn't be so extravagant. Now the price had increased, which made her feel more and more that she was actually quite good at managing the house. Pei Nanwei cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks and said to herself, it doesn't matter if you don't come often. It's good that you can come. So don't die. She suddenly blushed and said softly, what's the number 1 in the world? You still went out rubbing your waist. In the hinterland of Aquarius State in Beimang, the ice and snow melted and everything grew green. A horse galloped along the back of the hillside to the top of the mountain. A girl was running behind the horse. In addition to the huge sword box on her back, she also had many swords tied with hemp ropes. She looked like a Jianghu swindler who sold swords to cheat people. The person sitting high on the horse was an extremely attractive woman. She was Nangong Push, the champion of the last Rouge evaluation. Qin Yu, who was second place, only got the evaluation of not inferior to Nangong. In the new evaluation of the second year of Xiangfu, there were more than 14 people in the Wushu evaluation, but there were only 4 people in the Rouge evaluation. This person, who was given the nickname White Fox Face by His Royal Highness, was still on the list. The other 3 people were Qin Yu, who was about to be married to the new king of Liaodong, Zhao Wu, Jiang Ni of West Chu, and a woman who was raised in a house and unknown to people called Huyan Guanin. According to the obscure description of the Rouge evaluation, she should be a woman from the grassland of Beimang. In the end, she was kidnapped by Su Fengnian, the king of Beiliang, and kept as a mistress. Chapter 14-15. Ever since Wang Xing entered Beimang, she had been running behind Mr. Nangong. Many times, she had to stop and was required to run her qi. The girl had fainted 7 or 8 times. She was like a smart child who met the most demanding private school teacher, who wanted the child to recite the classics in her sleep, regardless of whether it would spoil the growth or not. It should be noted that except for the red sandalwood sword case, Wang Xing's other famous swords could only slightly hide the sword qi in their scabbards. Every time the girl was exhausted and her qi was disordered, the unruly famous swords of the past would come out to add fuel to the fire. The thin sword Moose Fish, the 3-inch blade Dogwood forged by the Confucian sage of the old northern Han, the Taoist talisman sword Yellow Crane, the sword that pierced through the abdomen of the emperor of Dongyue in the past, the Xiaodiao, with the tip of the sword exhaled like spring thunder, the Yuyu sword that clashed with the sword qi of other famous swords, and the Goose Yellow sword that was as lively as a girl in love. The sword case and the 7 swords made Wang Xing look like a funny hedgehog. As she and Elder Nangong headed north, there was no lack of discerning northern Mang experts who wanted to kill and rob them. Elder Nangong never cared if the young girl could deal with them or not, always watching with folded arms. Only when Wang Xing was injured by sword energy that was like a flood bursting through a dike, would he save the young girl. Then, he would tail those extremely unlucky northern Mang martial practitioners from a distance that was neither too far nor too close. Every time the young girl leisurely woke up, she would be thrown into the battlefield by Elder Nangong, repeating this process until Wang Xing successfully killed someone. Before this, in eastern Jinzhou, the two had encountered a Beimang cavalry of more than 1,000 people. Mr. Nangong also threw her directly into the battlefield. Wang Xing, who could only control 3 or 4 swords at most, was in a frenzy and killed more than 300 Beimang cavalrymen with 7 swords. Her life was hanging by a thread. When she was about to use all the swords in the sword case, Mr. Nangong rushed into the battlefield and knocked her unconscious. When Wang Xing woke up, she found that the Beimang barbarians were all dead and Mr. Nangong, whose clothes were as clean as new, was standing among the corpses. On the top of the mountain, Biyao led the horse and looked into the distance. She asked, "Do you know why the saber is always inferior to the sword?" Wang Xing shook his head. If her master wanted her to practice the sword, then she would practice the sword. His master had once said that he was the best sword embryo in the world, and that it would be a pity if he didn't practice the sword. In fact, Wang Xing felt somewhat regretful. Although his master often used swords, his master's martial path had begun with saber training. Therefore, Wang Xing would occasionally envy the glib-tongued Lu Yunzhang. Especially when she heard that Elder Nangong, who wore the spring thunder embroidered winter twin sabers on his waist, had once given a saber to her master who had traveled to Jianghu twice. This made the young girl even more reluctant to tell others. Biyao patted Wang Xing's head and said softly, "People are afraid of being serious, and things are afraid of being serious. Wang Xing, if you don't want to be his dispensable disciple for the rest of your life, then think about this problem carefully." Although Wang Xing did not understand, he still nodded his head out of habit. Biyao smiled and said, "There are millions of swords in the world, and they all have a master. As long as you can defeat her in the future, your master will have a whole new level of respect for you. In this world, there has never been a woman who has become the most powerful person in the world." Wang Xing exclaimed in surprise and said timidly, "Elder Nangong, are you talking about that West Chu princess with the surname Jiang? But she has been able to fly on her sword for a long time. I can't defeat her, right? And I heard that she's really good looking." Biyao sighed and said, "You silly girl." Wang Xing tiptoed slightly and fastened the few loose swords tightly. He then looked up and smiled at Elder Nangong and said, "Sir, if my master is no longer the most powerful person in the world in the future, you can take his place." Biyao patted the young girl's head and said helplessly, "You're really silly." Wang Xing hesitated for a moment and finally plucked up the courage to ask, "Sir, can I ask you a question?" Biyao said softly, "You want to ask why you came to Beimang?" Wang Xing nodded slightly. The most beautiful woman in the world raised her head slightly and laughed heartily. "Wang Xing, do you know what realm I'm in? I'm still stuck at the mysterious finger level. When I left the Tide Listening Pavilion, it's not that I couldn't reach the celestial state, nor that I couldn't become a master in the next martial arts evaluation. It's just that to me, as long as I'm not the most powerful person in the world, it's meaningless." Biyao loosened the reins and gently pressed her hands on the hilts of the spring thunder and winter embroidered sabers. He took a step forward and said, "Just one more step." This was the first time the young girl Wang Xing saw Elder Nangong in such high spirits. It was really beautiful. The Dongyue sword pool had countless engravings on the legendary cliff. Among them, the two words, sword pool, in the ancient seal script of the Great Qin dynasty and deep water, high mountain, long sword qi, written by Chao Sheng of the Dafeng dynasty were the most charming. Beside the sword pool, there were mountains and rocks. The water in the pool was green and the water rose and fell. The height of the water varied throughout the year. However, what was special about the sword pool was that during the rainy seasons of spring and summer, the water level of the sword pool would decrease and fall. The 7 words, deep water, high mountain, long sword qi, could be seen from top to bottom. On the contrary, during the second half of the rootless heavenly water season, the height of the water did not drop the word deep, leaving only the solitary word water in sight. The Song family of the sword pool had existed for more than 600 years, much longer than the Dongyue kingdom. However, ever since the Wu family's sword tomb appeared, the sword pool, a holy land of swords, had become a place of regret in the eyes of many. Unlike the Wu family's sword tomb, which worshipped ancient swords, the Song family had persisted in the principle of, the old man is better than the new sword, but the new sword is better than the old, in the hands of the previous grandmaster, Song Nianqing. Every swordsman of the Song family who had achieved success in swordsmanship had to throw his old sword into the sword pool before leaving for Jianghu and personally go to the sword furnace to forge a new sword. Outsiders had always been puzzled by this and felt that it was a beautiful wish of, the old man, the new sword. After Song Nianqing's death, Chai Qingshan, who had once been the guest of Prince Zhao Yi of Guangling, returned to the sword pool after being expelled. This grandmaster of swordsmanship who had never had a disciple had finally, belatedly, taken in 2 disciples. The young man was a brilliant disciple of the Song family and the young girl was an unpolished jade covered in dust. The 3 of them stood on a huge rock of the spring god lake in the sword pool that was engraved with the words, "The enemy of 10,000. The rock was as large as a small mountain, square and extremely majestic. The old man without a sword lowered his head and looked at the deep and ancient spring water. His voice was hoarse as he said, "My senior brother was defeated by Li Chungang back then. He didn't commit suicide, but rather, he died from injuries. The family head, Song Nianqing, had died in the pugilistic world outside the sword pool last year. It wasn't because he had died of old age, but because he had used all of his 14 new swords. He had even sacrificed his life to use a sword at the level of an earth immortal. However, he was still killed openly. I'm telling you these 2 things because I want you to understand one thing. Other than the sword tomb of the Wu family, there are many swordsmen who don't care about the sword pool. There are many more than you can imagine. Chai Ching-shan probably felt that this truth was too cruel for the two children. He laughed and said self-deprecatingly, other than an old man like me, the sword pool has a reputation in Jianghu. You should call him senior brother, Li Bai. He has no hope of reaching the peak of swordsmanship. Compared to people of the same age like Wu Luding of the Sword Tomb, swordsman Sui Hua, and Qi Xianxia of Longhu Mountain, the gap is not only in swordsmanship and sword moves, but also in vision and breadth of mind. So you are the last seeds of the sword pool. Tell me, is there anyone you must surpass when practicing swordsmanship? The youth with a jade-like face had a lively personality. He smiled brightly and said, first, senior brother Li Bai, then you, master. After that, we will go to the sword tomb of the Wu family and look for Dong Tai. If we can't find him, we will go to Biyao. At this point, the youth pointed at the girl beside him and complained, Master, junior sister is no different from many of the girls in the sword pool. She secretly admires the king of Biyao, Su Fengnian. Every time we gather and talk about that guy, they, tsk, their eyes are like the water of the pool under our feet, green and shiny. Master, this is too outrageous. That guy surnamed Su is the mortal enemy of our sword pool. In any case, there isn't a man in the sword pool who doesn't want to use a sword to kill Su Fengnian. The girl's delicate face flushed red. She flew into a rage out of humiliation and shouted, Song Tinglu, shut your stinky mouth. No one will treat you as a mute. Then, the girl looked at her master guiltily, afraid that she would make her master unhappy. Chai Ching-shan dismissed it with a smile and said with emotion, it's not a bad thing that love lasts for a long time. Su Fengnian, has he become the Li Chun gang in the hearts of my generation? At this moment, an old woman with white hair and vicissitudes of life staggered over. Chai Ching-shan and the youth walked down from the boulder. The youth ran over to help the old woman and shouted with a smile, Great-grandmother, are you here to enjoy the scenery while the sun is good? The old woman stroked the youth's head with a kind gaze. Tinglu, remember to learn the sword well from your master. You have to be diligent. As for whether you can master it or not, it's up to you. Remember, if you go out in the future, you have to come home properly. Chai Ching-shan nodded in greeting. The old woman smiled and nodded. After the three of them left, the old woman sat by the pool with a serene bearing. She smiled and said, Nianqing, I used to wait for you. I waited for many years and many times. No matter how long it took, I would always be able to wait for you to come home. She folded her skinny hands on her knees. Her red hair from back then had gradually turned white. In her life, she was used to staring at his back. The words between husband and wife might not even be as much as the teachings between husband and disciple. Every time he left the sword pool and returned to the sword pool, she would stand at the entrance of the sword pool. He never looked at her. She did not regret it. Chapter 14:16. The old man closed his eyes and murmured, Nianqing, now you're the one waiting for me. In Jiangnan's water town, there were many small bridges and flowing water. The young man nicknamed Bamboo wandered the streets of the town for an entire day before returning home in the dusk. His mother had closed the cloth shop and was preparing food at home. The young man buried his head in eating. The woman who had brought her son to this town the year before last said softly, Eat slowly. No one will steal from you. The young man only cared about wolfing down the food. The woman smiled, Your brother Wen is already married. I don't expect you to find a good girl like the young lady of the Lu family. It's fine if you can just kidnap one back. The young man's mouth was full of food as he mumbled, I know. She sighed, Don't just stay outside all day doing nothing. I don't want you to earn money. It's just that it's not good for a man to always be doing nothing. When a woman marries, she always likes to find a man who has work to do. Even if she's poor at the beginning, she'll have something to look forward to. Her days will be more comfortable. The young man suddenly slammed the bowl and his hand onto the table. His face was full of anger as he roared, Yes, I'm not doing proper work. But even if I'm like my father, what's the use? My father is famous for being an honest man, isn't he? Anyone who does farm work would give him a thumbs up, right? What's the result? Didn't he leave us behind for so many years? We don't even know if he's dead or not. If he comes back one day, I won't recognize him as my father. Bastard. Her eyes were red. She was originally a gentle woman. Although her voice trembled, she said with an unquestionable attitude, "You're not allowed to talk about your father like that." The young man got up and left the stool. He squatted at the door and sulked. The woman turned her head and secretly wiped her tears with her sleeve. After clearing away the bowls and chopsticks, she carried a small stool to the door and said softly, "I'll warm the food for you in the pot. When you want to eat, just let me know." The young man lowered his head and choked out, "Mother, I don't want to get angry at you. I'm just complaining about my father." "He let you down," the woman smiled and said. "How did your father let your mother down?" "Your father, ever since he knew me, has never said a harsh word to me, nor has he lost his temper once. For so many years, the crops have been taken care of by him alone. He has never allowed me to work in the fields, not even once. Every time he went to the market in town, he didn't forget to bring back some hairpins, rouge, and other small things. Back then, I complained that he was wasting money. Every time your father said he understood, he understood. But every time, your father would still buy them. Your mother, I only complained about your father verbally, but I liked him in my heart. Which girl in the village doesn't envy your mother for marrying into a good family?" The young man said angrily, "It's my father's fortune to be able to marry you. He should love my mother so much." The woman smiled and stroked her son's head. "When you find a wife in the future, you have to treat her as well." The young man was still resentful. "Anyway, he's definitely not like my father. Once he left, there was no news of him for several years. He didn't even know how to send a letter home." The woman smiled gently and didn't say anything. The young man suddenly said, "Mother, Brother Wenhua said that I shouldn't mingle in the pugilistic world. He said that when he has saved enough money, he can buy that restaurant from the shopkeeper around this autumn. In the future, he wants me to help him do odd jobs, and I agree." The woman said happily, "That's a good thing. You know so many friends, but only your brother Wenhua truly cares for you. In the future, when you help him with things, put in more effort. Don't think too much about money. Your father said that we humans can't climb out of money once we fall into it. That's the life of a lifetime of hard work. It looks like we don't have to worry about food and clothing, but it's actually not comfortable." The young man smiled. "Heh, my father can say such things." The woman pretended to hit him. The young man suddenly asked, "My father's name is Wang Mingyin?" The woman who was just pretending to give her son a chestnut, now really hit her son's forehead. She laughed angrily and said, "How can a son call his father's name directly?" The young man smiled and said, "Mother, let me tell you, there used to be a man called Wang Mingyin in the Jianghu. He was very powerful. His brother was Wang Mingyang, who guarded Xiangfan City for 10 years. He was the only high-ranking official that even the prince of Northern Liang couldn't do anything about. Wang Mingyang himself was also very powerful. He was the 11th martial arts master in the world. The Wang family of the two brothers was even more terrifying. I've heard of a scholarly saying, generations of Zhaning. It probably means that many generations of the family were high-ranking officials and dignitaries. Mother, do you want to hear about the Jianghu deeds of the guy with the same name as our father?" The woman shook her head and smiled. "I don't want to hear about it." The young man looked at the sky and stood up. "Brother Wen said yesterday that he asked me to find him for a drink when I have time. It seems that he heard something happy. I'll go now." The woman hurriedly stood up. "Bring some cloth." The young man rolled his eyes. "Brother Wen doesn't care about this." The woman glared at him. "It's good that he doesn't care. Our Wang family has to put ourselves in his shoes." The young man made a face. "That's what my father said too, right?" The woman went to the inner room and brought back 2 pieces of cloth. She handed them to her son. After drinking, walk slowly on the way home. The young man took the cloth and left the house as fast as he could, saying that he knew. The woman saw that her son didn't close the door. She shook her head helplessly and went to close it. When she was about to bolt the door, she paused. In the end, she didn't completely close the door. She turned and walked into the house. Ming-yin, your son has grown up. He's like you. On the great snow plateau of Mount Hui, the Xianyuan family's reputation couldn't reach the top of Jianghu even in the hands of Xianyuan Great Plate. Now, not only had it suppressed the Taoist master's mansion of Longhu Mountain, it could even look down on the Dongyue sword pool. In the whole world, perhaps only the Wu family's sword tomb could be on par with it. All of this was attributed to the woman in purple who was in charge of the Moonless Tower. Countless Jianghu heroes willingly prostrated themselves under her purple clothes. When she had a place in the martial arts review, the Great Snow Plateau, which had become the newest holy land in Jianghu, was even more crowded. There were so many mountaineers that it was impossible for people to go down the mountain. When her name didn't appear in the Rouge Review, countless young chivalrous men in purple who admired her felt injustice. They clamored that they would teach Nalin Yusi and Xia Guining a lesson. The former fourth prince, who was now the emperor, had come to visit but was refused at the door. In addition, the king of Biyao had asked the Fish Dragon gang to escort the books in the Tide Listening Pavilion Martial Library to Mount Hui. These two things undoubtedly had great influence on the Jianghu people who liked to make groundless accusations. Many people speculated that the reason why the emperor didn't like Su Fengnian so much was not only because of the old grudge between the previous emperor and the vassal kings of Biyao, but also because of jealousy. This kind of wild speculation, which was originally sneered at by the Liang officialdom, began to gain a firm foothold after the emperor personally sent people to the Moonless Tower of Mount Hui with the inscription, "Invincible in the world." The whole Jianghu had a better impression of the new emperor, who was famous for his various literary and administrative actions after ascending the throne. After all, the two previous emperors of Liang were both iron-fisted monarchs who liked to pass on the Jianghu. The current emperor didn't treat the Jianghu people kindly, but at the very least, he didn't have any deep hatred for them. This was worth celebrating even if it wasn't the new year. Xianyuan Qingfeng stood under an old cassia tree. After Mount Hui's chief guest, Huang Fengfua, left the mountain, and the purple-clothed woman, who was the Mount Hui mountain master and the Wulin Alliance leader, was obsessed with martial arts, Huang Fengfua, who had reached the Finger Mystery Realm, became more and more powerful. However, even though he was second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people in Mount Hui, Huang Fengfua was more cautious than before. He didn't dare to cross the line. In the past, in order to increase her realm, she had absorbed the internal energy of countless Jianghu masters. Her cruel methods were even worse than those so-called Jianghu devils. The latter would at least pay attention to the fact that a rabbit doesn't eat the grass near its burrow. She had started from killing the retainers of Mount Hui from the very beginning. Only when no one was worthy of her attention did she target the masters outside the mountain. Now, after the battle with Wang Xianji, her martial arts attainment and realm had improved by leaps and bounds. Some of the secret manuals sent by the Tide Listening Pavilion made her even more powerful. Xianyuan Qingfeng asked calmly, "How many second-grade masters are there on the mountain?" Huang Fengfua replied respectfully, "There are 6 people willing to serve Mount Hui. There are 11 people who are only willing to add flowers to the brocade." Xianyuan Qingfeng sneered, "Flowers to the brocade." Huang Fengfua felt a chill all over his body. Xianyuan Qingfeng kept her hands behind her back. She raised her head and looked at the leaves of the cassia tree. Her tone turned gentle, "Flowers to the brocade, charcoal in the snow, frost in the snow, oil in the fire, cotton in the wind, and a knife in the heart." Then, she mocked herself, "What kind of woman do you think I am?" Of course, Huang Fengfua wasn't naive enough to think that she was talking to him. He left silently. She waited until Huang Fengfua was far away. "At that time, you used the luck of the Imperial Jade Seal to help me stabilize my realm. I didn't accompany you to Shenwu City to deal with Han Xingxian. But later, Wang Xianji went to find trouble with you. We don't owe each other anything anymore. Now, I have Zhao Huangchao and useless monk's martial arts experience. I don't need those boxes of secret manuals at all. Do you want to do a big deal with me again? Xianyuan Qingfeng was silent for a moment. Or do you think we're even? Dunhuang City. In a hidden house that no one cared about, a plump woman bent down to protect a toddler who had just learned to walk. The toddler wobbled as he reached out to grab the bead curtain hanging at the door. As the child's mother, her eyes were filled with doting, love, guilt, and regret. She crouched down and hugged the child. The adult's cheek touched the child's cheek. She said softly, "Su Nianliang, my little sweet potato, when you grow up, you must find your father." Chapter 14-17. The three of them took a detour to Green Deer Cave Academy. The three of them stopped at the foot of the mountain and gave the horses to the academy's odd job workers to feed them. Then, they walked up the stairs. Although Su Fengnian was in a hurry, he climbed the mountain slowly. It was on this mountain path that he once had a thrilling battle of life and death with Gao Shulu. After that, he obtained the celestial physique. Miss Wang Xianji also wore that inappropriate mink hat to stop her. It was like throwing an egg against a rock. When Su Fengnian rested in a pavilion halfway up the mountain, he looked at the mountains and rivers of Yuzhou. For some reason, he remembered the scholar who said, "Ancestor, please die." Su Fengnian leaned against a bright red pavilion pillar that the academy had repainted at the beginning of the year. He muttered to himself, "Xianyuan Jingsheng, I gave books to Mount Hui last year. Perhaps your daughter was suspicious and thought that I wanted to do some business with her. In fact, I just wanted to have more Jianghu seeds. Xianyuan Qingfeng thought that I didn't know what Zhao Huangchao did before he died. I just didn't want to pursue the matter. If she wants to be the Wulin Alliance leader as a woman and be Mount Hui's Wang Xianji, then let her be. In another 100 years, the number of heavenly phenomenon cultivators will probably be rarer than the current Earth immortals. There won't be any scholars who can read books and reach the Confucian saint realm. Back then, you said, an ant trying to shake a tree is worthy of respect and overestimation. I didn't feel anything back then. Now that I think about my situation in Beiyang, I can't help but feel sad." Lu Yunzhang, whose bruises hadn't completely disappeared, whispered, "Master, it's fine to go to Bishan County. After all, there's such a beautiful woman like Aunt Pei. It's not good to be left out. But here in Green Deer Cave Academy, I can hear the sound of those scholars even from halfway up the mountain. My head hurts. Master, what do you think you're doing here? I'll tell you in advance. If there's no second Aunt Pei and you're only here to listen to people recite books, I'll really get angry. When the time comes, I'll raise my sword and slash it down again and again, chopping those scholars into pieces." Hu Yulong said angrily, "Lu Yunzhang, haven't hit me enough? Believe it or not, I'll beat you to death." Lu Yunzhang also stomped his feet and looked at Su Fengnian with a resentful expression. He said aggrievedly, "Master, you're biased toward eldest senior brother. It's fine that you gave old Monster Wang's secret manual to him for safekeeping, but you even gave your grandfather's Saber manual, which he painstakingly worked on for his entire life, to eldest senior brother. I was picked up by the roadside and given to my stepmother to raise, right?" Su Fengnian bent 2 fingers and gently knocked on Lu Yunzhang's head. He smiled and said, "It's not that I'm stingy or biased towards Yudilong. It's just that those 2 items are not to your liking. When I have some martial arts insights in the future, as long as I have the opportunity to compile them into a book, I will only give them to you and not Yudilong and Wang Sheng." Su Fengnian said softly, "Continue up the mountain." Lu Yunzhang, who was following behind Su Fengnian, glanced at Hu Yulong smugly. The latter rolled his eyes. Su Fengnian asked with a smile, "Have you ever thought of a question? Why are Buddhist temples built at the foot of the mountain while large Taoist temples are at the top of the mountain? As for Confucian academies, they tend to be halfway up the mountain." Lu Yunzhang said without hesitation, "Bald donkeys like incense money. They're afraid that pilgrims will be too tired from climbing the mountain. Those Taoists seek immortality and ascension. Naturally, they have to choose a place closest to the immortals. They recite sutras and flatter them every day so that the immortals can hear them. As for what the scholars think, it's probably because the foot and top of the mountain have been occupied, so they can only build houses halfway up the mountain. Master, isn't my explanation very reasonable? Su Fengnian didn't comment and continued asking, Dilong, what do you think? Yu Dilong was just a shepherd boy. He had never seen any Taoist temples or academies in his life. He had no understanding of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, so he was naturally confused. However, since his master had asked, the child could only bite the bullet and think about it. He finally understood what Lu Yunzhang meant by having a headache. Thankfully, his master was understanding. He quickly turned his head and said with a smile, if you can't figure it out for the time being, don't think about it. But when you grow up and encounter something that you can or can't think about it more. If you can or can't do it, there's no harm in doing it. In life, when there's no need to worry about self-preservation, you only want to have a clear mind and ignore the wishes of others. It's fine if you don't want to be a land immortal. Yu Dilong nodded vigorously and said, I'll remember. The three of them arrived at the entrance of the Green Deer Cave Academy. There was a rule that martial artists had to take off their armor and sabers. Of course, it was set by Su Fengnian himself. However, Yu Dilong was unwilling to take off the big saber, and Lu Yunzhang was also unwilling to part with the long saber he nicknamed Big-Footed Wife. The two of them could only wait in the open square outside the academy. Su Fengnian took off the Bailiang saber from his waist and placed it in a large bamboo basket placed on both sides of the entrance. There were already 6 or 7 luxurious long swords with beautiful sword tassels inside. Now, Bailiang didn't allow private individuals to carry sabers. Otherwise, they would be thrown into prison by the roaming cavalry. There was no mercy. Otherwise, Su Fengnian estimated that there would be 6 or 7 Bailiang sabers inlaid with pearls and jade in the basket. The Liang imperial court didn't forbid academies from all over the world. Shangyin Academy was the most famous private school in the world. However, the Zhao clan didn't support it. The founders of the academies were mostly local famous scholars and scholars. Very few local officials were appointed as mountain elders or cave masters. Bailiang was an exception. Under the personal supervision of Su Fengnian, the current dozen or so academies in Bailiang, Yuliang, and Lingling were not only funded by Mount Qingliang and the local government, but officials were also not allowed to obstruct or suppress the academies. For example, the cave master of the Green Deer Cave Academy was the leader of the local imperial censors, Huang Chang. Although these academies were the Pure Land established by Su Fengnian, the Northwest vassal king, those scholars didn't care about the milk is the mother. When the war in Yuzhou was urgent, especially when the 2 cities of Crouching Bao and Sheguang were conquered, the academy's curses and criticisms were the loudest. Then it more or less spread to the common people and people's hearts wavered. Not only did the meritorious generals like Yan Wenluan hate this, even the Yuzhou provincial governor Hu Kuei and the Liangzhou provincial governor Tian Peifang, who was born as a scholar, both expressed their concerns to Deputy Administrator Song Dongming. However, the insightful people, like Administrator Li Gongdan, knew that the direction of the academies depended on how the king of Bailiang would decide. Of course, most of the local officials in Bailiang felt that these embroidered pillows who dared to embarrass the king of Bailiang would not have a good ending. Especially when Yuan Dao and Wan Qi made contributions outside the gourd mouth and eased the war in Yuzhou, they all felt that it was time to kill the chicken to warn the monkey and kill the evil wind and rain. Then, Su Fengnian walked into the Green Deer Cave Academy, which was full of books. Because he had only met Huang Chang and the others at the gate of the academy, and there were many foreign scholars in the academy, no one in the Xanadu recognized him. They only thought that he was a Bailiang aristocratic family who came to the academy to study. Su Fengnian entered a library. The lectures in the academy were mainly about Confucian classics, history books, poetry, and literature, and sometimes about current politics. Today's lecture was hosted by a great Confucian scholar. The library was spacious, and there were more than 100 futons on the ground for the scholars to sit on. However, there were still not enough futons, so Su Fengnian, who entered from the back door, could only sit casually at the back. The great Confucian scholar, who was only a juror in the imperial examinations, was explaining the art of making. It was a little suspicious that a 9th-level master was wantonly commenting on a grandmaster of martial arts. However, after Su Fengnian listened carefully for a moment, he still felt that he had benefited a lot, especially when it came to guessing questions. The scholars of Liangdi were going to the capital to take the imperial examinations in the spring. Perhaps there would be a few more people who could pass the imperial examinations. Ever since Su Shao, Beiliang had turned a blind eye to the scholars flowing out of the capital. From Yan Jieshi to Yao Baifeng entering the capital to take up a post, Su Shao did not purposely make things difficult for them. Su Fengnian was also happy to see Sun Yin succeed. The reason was simple. Li Shan had once made an analogy. When a baby bird grew up, it would feed its mother, let alone a human. At the time, the youth His Royal Highness was still puzzled. Li Shan smiled and said that perhaps only 1 or 2 of the 10 people would be grateful to Beiliang, but that was enough. If the 10 people were confined in Beiliang and cut off their path to fame and official career, then 8 or 9 of them would harbor hatred towards Beiliang. Chapter 14:18. Next, the great Confucian picked a few topics that were not so boring and allowed the young scholars to express their opinions. They talked about the emperor's establishment of the 6 pavilions, the order for 12 painting masters to paint the portraits of the meritorious officials of the spring and autumn period, and their views on the emperor allowing the portraits to be placed in the temple of meritorious officials and the imperial ancestral temple. Most importantly, the great Confucian smiled and asked the scholars to guess whether the old Prince Liang would be among the portraits. If so, who would be the painter? Would it be He Lu, who had the reputation of family of He, family of Lu, family of wealth? Or would it be little Yuqi, who was famous for his paintings of Buddha, ghosts and deities, especially the 1,000 Hands Eye exorcism wall? Or would it be Zheng Xixuan, who had recently presented his poems and paintings to the emperor himself? There was a lot of discussion in the library, and it was very lively. Su Fengnian was a little emotional. After Zhao Zhuan set a trap for the 10,000 Yu cavalry in Ji Bei, and then demonstrated his power in the northwest, at the Ministry of War, he quickly combined strength with gentleness. There was a rumor outside the palace that the emperor wanted to lose out on Su Zhao's posthumous title, and wanted to posthumously promote General Su Shao. As for this loss, of course, it was caused by the then Grand Secretary, Zhang Jiulu, and his new emperor, Zhao Zhuan, and his new dynasty were trying their best to remedy it. If this was the work of the head of the Secretariat, Su Fengnian would not be surprised. But if it was Zhao Zhuan's idea, then it was very worrying. Su Fengnian was not worried about the narrow-minded emperor of Liang. On the contrary, the more Zhao Zhuan did not care about trifles, the more dangerous Beiliang's situation would be. Zhao Zhuan harbored great enmity toward Beiliang, or perhaps toward Su Fengnian. The matter of Ji Bei and the transport of water had already been made clear. The more Zhao Zhuan gave Su Shao, the more he would demand from Su Fengnian. What he gave was fake, and what he wanted was real. But in the eyes of the Liang court, this kind of choice was very reasonable. Su Fengnian was lost in thought, and then he was suddenly disturbed by a quarrel. It turned out that the 7 or 8 foreign scholars and local scholars who were in opposing camps had suddenly begun to quarrel. They were arguing about when Beimang would take Xiaoguang City and how stable Huda City was. Neither side had any objections to the fall of Xiaoguang City under the assault of more than 200,000 Yuzhou soldiers. However, the local scholars of Beiliang felt that they could at least hold on for another 10 to 15 months. The foreign scholars, on the other hand, had learned from the example of Crouching Bao and Wanhe, believed that Xiaoguang City could be taken in the near future. As for Huda City, which was known as the most majestic town in the northwest, the quarrel was even more intense. The former felt that if they could hold on for a month, they would have succeeded, while the latter almost blindly believed that Huda City could become the second pillar of the Central Plains, Xiangfan City, the pillar of Beimang's cavalry. During this period of time, there was a clear confrontation. Both sides argued that Su Fengnian had personally appeared at the mouth of the gourd and crippled Beimang's supply line. They quarreled until their faces turned red. The foreign scholars believed that the son of a rich family should not sit under the awning. They said that Su Fengnian's childish act of risking his life was because he wanted to be a hero whose name would go down in history. It was a childish attitude that caused mischief. Not only could he not be praised, if he were the emperor, he would be impeached and punished. After all, the Biyao scholars were a little clumsy with words. Many of their rebuttals were not able to express their ideas. The scholars who went to Liang were well-read and could always come up with a chain of sages' principles to mock and ridicule. In the end, the Biyao scholars who lost the quarrel were indeed natives of Biyao. They almost rolled up their sleeves and used their fists to reason with those bastards who just stood there and talked. In the end, a scholar from the Shangyin Palace glared at them and scolded them as barbarians who added fuel to the fire. This completely messed up the situation. For a moment, fists and saliva flew around Su Fengnian. It was very lively. The Biyao scholars originally thought that they would not be at an advantage in the quarrel because they were tall and strong, so they would not be at a disadvantage. They did not expect that the two foreign scholars had practiced martial arts and were proficient in both the pen and the sword. Su Fengnian, who had been sitting on the ground all this time and had been implicated, raised his hand to block the sole of one of his shoes and gently pushed it away. Very quickly, he had to turn his head to avoid someone's spit and then support a scholar who had been beaten until he staggered backward. The Biyao generals who had climbed the mountain to study and left their swords in bamboo baskets were angered when they heard a little about it. They practically jumped over the heads of many scholars and entered the battlefield, turning the disadvantageous situation around in an instant. The great scholar who had once been in charge of lecturing in the Shangyin Palace but was fond of military studies did not feel that it was a disgrace to the refined. Not only did he not harshly berate them, he even smiled and stroked his beard. He sat on the ground and commented on the martial arts of both sides. The foreign scholars who dared to come to Biyao would not have the courage and insight if they did not have a bit of courage. Therefore, the fight became more and more intense. Very quickly, blood was spilled. Even so, no one retreated. First, the generals who had come because of the Biyao's reputation entered the battlefield as reinforcements. Their actions quickly resonated with all the Biyao scholars in the library. They all got up and ran wildly toward the battlefield behind the library. Soon after, there were also foreign scholars who gathered together as fellow countrymen from the various daos and provinces of Liang to help out. The great scholar was still not in a hurry. He watched as the number of scholars who were sitting decreased. Many scholars with small arms and thin legs also got up and rushed over. Even if they did not fight, they would still encourage others to join in the fight. Su Fengnian helped the locals a few times, but he had a sense of propriety. He only helped them block a few moves that were too heavy. He also secretly pulled back a few steps when one of the generals kicked him viciously in the groin. In the end, the battle behind the library came to an end. The gong sounded and the soldiers retreated. Both sides confronted each other aggressively and stared at each other, ready to start the next big battle at any time. Su Fengnian, of course, stood on the side of the local scholars. Beside him, there was a dandy from a general family in Yuzhou who had blood seeping out of the corner of his mouth. He grimaced in pain and turned his head to Su Fengnian, who had blocked a fist for him. He said with a smile, "Brother, thanks for just now. When we go down the mountain, I'll treat you to a drink with girls. I've long disliked this bunch of bastards. Oh right, I'm Yang Huiji from Shirlu County. When you get to the county, say my name and I'll guarantee that you'll be safe. Of course, don't do anything like killing and robbing. Even I don't dare to do such things." Cave Master Huang Shang heard the news and rushed over. He ran into the library and shouted angrily, "The academy is a place for scholars to cultivate and live in peace. What are you doing? If you have the strength to fight, go join the army at the Biyao border." Huang Shang didn't look at the two groups of people who were clearly divided. He sighed softly to the calm Confucian lecturer and said, "Xueji, you don't even control them a little." The Confucian scholar called Xueji smiled and casually pointed at a calligraphy painting hanging on the wall behind him. "We scholars are not afraid of being unreasonable, but we are afraid of not being reasonable. It's better to be calm and to fight. It's better than holding it in and waiting to be dealt with in the future. Revenge is never too late for a gentleman." Many years later, when those with high positions in the officialdom teach those with low positions, those with low positions bully those who aren't officials, and those who aren't officials can only bully the common people, wouldn't that be too scary? It's better for everyone to finish fighting today and vent their anger. Then, we can sit down and continue talking. Cave Master, I'm waiting for them to calm down after they can't fight anymore. Then, I'll enlighten them a little. These half-baked people in the library usually sway a lot. If they don't suffer, they won't remember anything. Huang Shang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said helplessly, Old Shui, you. Huang Shang suddenly saw a figure out of the corner of his eye. His heart immediately shook. Right now, the officialdom of Biyao was waiting to see a good show from the various academies. Huang Shang absolutely supported the scholars' discussion of politics. However, he was worried that the academies, on the mountain, were interfering with the military affairs at the border and causing the people, below the mountain, to be unsettled. Although the king of Biyao had promised him and the officialdom not to interfere with the academy's affairs, he had also said that the academy would not be punished for their words. He had even protected the scholars from the disaster of war and the humiliation of martial artists. However, Huang Shang still didn't quite believe that the young and impetuous king of Biyao would really be a hands-off shopkeeper. Moreover, it was the academy that had caused trouble first. Therefore, when the Green Deer Cave Master saw Su Fengnian appear on the battlefield, he immediately felt a chill run down his spine. Was Su Fengnian going to make things difficult for him? The seeds of learning in Biyao hadn't even taken root yet, and he was going to give up halfway? Huang Shang was indeed a stubborn person. The colder his heart, the more unwilling he was to back down. He took a few steps forward and asked Su Fengnian directly, Has the king of Biyao come here to denounce us? Is he going to close the academy? Is he going to forbid the scholars of Biyao from studying? Su Fengnian shook his head and looked at the words. He said calmly, I originally just wanted to take a look and then leave. However, I am much more at ease now. The words on the wall are, important matters of 1,000 years require the most consideration. Su Fengnian looked around and said with a smile, I hope that all of you scholars will think about it carefully. Only after you have thought about it will you speak louder. You and I will encourage each other. Su Fengnian faced the great scholar and bowed slightly with his hands clasped in front of him. This principle was taught by teacher. Su Fengnian has learned from your teachings. Shui should have hurriedly stood up to return the greeting, but for some reason, at that moment, this old Confucian scholar who had been depressed in Shangyin Academy forcibly placed his buttocks back onto the prayer mat, straightened his back, and silently accepted the greeting. Long after the young king of Biyao and cave master Huang Shang left the library, Shui still didn't move. The old man finally lowered his head and reached out to touch the ground outside the praying mat. Who said that the soil of Biyao can only produce horses and armor, but not scholars? Shui faced the group of young scholars who still hadn't recovered from their shock. He raised his hand and pressed down, his expression full of high spirits. All of you, sit down. I, Shui, will finally talk about how to think. This is the kind of thinking that scholars of my generation should have. Chapter 14-19. The mountainhead of Green Deer Cave Academy, Huang Chang, saw Su Fengnian off alone. On the way down the mountain, the two of them did not speak much. Huang Chang was exhausted because his momentum had been exhausted by the first spurt of energy. Since the young king of Qingliang did not come to the foothills of Green Deer Cave Academy to settle accounts with his students, then Huang Chang did not have a target to shoot at. After all, he could not give Su Fengnian an inch and ask for a foot by asking for more positions in the local government offices. Mount Qingliang was already very generous in allowing scholars to hold important positions in various provinces, counties and counties. Even if Huang Chang's face was even thicker, he could not open his mouth. The more silent Su Fengnian was, the more nervous Huang Chang became. When they were near the foot of the mountain, the old man sighed and smiled bitterly. Your Highness, your knife is always on this old man's neck, but you don't cut it off or take it away. This old man feels uncomfortable. How about you give me a quick answer? If you really can't, then I'll say it from the bottom of my heart. Let someone else be the headmaster of the Green Deer Cave. The academy is like a field of crops. It's hard to get some good seedlings. If your highness thinks I'm not taking care of it well, then let someone else be obedient. Don't take out your anger on those seedlings. Su Fengnian didn't stop. He said slowly, Teacher, you worry too much. There's nothing wrong with the scholars of the academy discussing the military and politics of Biyao. There's nothing wrong with the more you debate, the more confused you become. Huang Chang nodded as if relieved of a heavy burden. Su Fengnian continued, but as headmasters and teachers, you have to take advantage of the situation and not look on coldly. I'm not asking you to speak good words for the Biyao Frontier Army, because that's meaningless. I hope that the scholars who have taken root in Biyao understand one thing. The reason they can point out the country is because there are people dying on the front lines every day. It's those dead people and the Biyao Frontier Army who are about to die in battle that make Biyao's territory not have a wisp of smoke. No matter whether they won or lost on the battlefield, they were not wrong at all. Of course, it's not a problem to scold me, Mount Qingliang, or the Biyao Protectorate for not properly dispatching troops or for making a mistake in their plans. However, if you have the intention of watching the fire burn across the river and rejoicing in other people's misfortune, Biyao has always politely declined such a scholar. You can go back to wherever you came from. Mount Qingliang can still afford this little bit of traveling expenses. Huang Shang's expression became serious again. Su Fengnian glanced at the old man and smiled indifferently. You always feel that there's something wrong with other people. You always think that if I don't help the people, who can I do it? Reading books is to cultivate righteousness, not to cultivate arrogance and viciousness. I myself am a person who has been through this. All day long, I complain about the heavens and accuse others. When I look around, all I see is injustice. The depression in my heart is even more difficult to suppress. Perhaps you've never experienced such a thing in your life, which is why I made a special trip to Green Deer Cave Academy to say a few words. Huang Shang was half believing and half doubtful. You really only said a few words? Su Fengnian smiled. With regards to the scholars of the academy discussing military affairs at the border, it's better to let things flow. I will have the government gift the various academies a few sets of the essentials of military supplies written by Chen Jibao. Why don't you let a great scholar familiar with military affairs take the lead in explaining it? First, understand the history of cold knives, guns, crossbows, and horse policy in Biyao, and understand how we manage the army in Biyao. Only then can you talk about the important matters at the border. Huang Shang sighed emotionally. What a good, it's better to let things flow than to let things flow. Huang Shang hesitated for a moment before adding, Your Highness has handled this matter beautifully. Huang Shang was famous for being stingy with words of praise. This kind of bootlicking was truly difficult to speak of. It could be seen that Su Fengnian's visit to the academy had indeed made the old man very satisfied. Su Fengnian laughed self-deprecatingly. Technical work, as a reward? Huang Shang, who no longer held any grudges in his heart, spoke more freely. I only know how to study. I dare say that in less than 5 years, Liang will have a whole new level of respect for Biyao's literature and classics. Before Su Fengnian mounted his horse and left, he said to Huang Shang, on the eve of the Qingming festival, please bring the scholars of the academy to the steel forest on Mount Qingliang. There will be a libation ceremony there. Huang Shang was stunned for a moment before replying in a low voice, as it should be. Leaving Green Deer Cave Academy, the three of them galloped on. Lu Yunchang asked, Master, are we going to the Biyao Protectorate or to Huda's city, which is currently at war? Su Fengnian said unhappily, go back to the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry. Don't worry about anything else. Yu Dilong shouted, Master, I want to go to Huda's city to kill the barbarians. Su Fengnian was silent for a moment before suddenly saying, Dilong, go to Liuzhou with Yunchang. Go to Qingsang City and secretly protect Yang Guangdou and Qinshiliang. If a war really breaks out, you can do as you see fit. I allow you to make your own decisions. At a fork in the road, Lu Yunchang was pleasantly surprised. He rubbed his hands and said, Master, Then we'll have to split up now. Su Fengnian nodded and did not forget to remind him, Yunchang, when you're on the battlefield, keep an eye on your senior brother. Don't let him kill until he's blinded by madness. In short, none of you should die in Liuzhou. Your real battlefield is the Jianghu in the future. Yudilong grinned and said, Master, after I've paid off the big guy's debt, I'll be rewarded. Master, don't forget to reward me. I still have to send it to Auntie Pei. She needs a lot of money to build the courtyard house. We can't let Auntie Pei borrow money from outsiders, right? Su Fengnian laughed and scolded, You're already siding with outsiders at such a young age? All right. If that day really comes, the Beiliang frontier army won't forget to give you a copper coin. Lu Yunchang laughed and said, A married daughter is like spilled water. Yudilong raised his fist and said anxiously, Who are you calling a girl? Are you itching for a beating? Do you want me to help you beat it? Su Fengnian stopped his horse at the fork in the road. He smiled as he looked at the backs of the two horses chasing each other. Suddenly, he whipped his horse and moved forward. In the past, the young man in brocade robes angrily whipped Liangzhou city. The awakening of hibernation had passed and the spring equinox was approaching. Su Fengnian rode alone along the heavily guarded road to Huaiyang Pass in the north of Liangzhou. At this time, not only was the war in Beiliang getting heavier and the world in chaos, but after Ko Jianghui resigned and retired to the countryside, the young commander of the West Chu Line, Xia Shibian, assumed the position of commander of the Eastern Line. He fought 3 battles in a row in 10 days. Xia Shibian, who had previously defeated Yan Jinshuan's Iron Cavalry and Yang Xinxing's Ji Zhou's elite infantry, was once again met with the expectations of the West Chu imperial court. He was defeated in succession and was forced to retreat. The West Chu navy led by Chao Chongqing finally stopped holding back and began to push downstream. In order to reduce the pressure on Xia Shibian on land, they began to confront the navy of Guangling Prince Zhao Yi. On the other hand, the Prince of Yanqi, Zhao Bing, led 100,000 elite soldiers and marched northward. At the same time, the commander of the southern expedition, General Lu Xingxiang, led tens of thousands of soldiers from Nanjing's Ji camp to the south, coordinating with the southern army. The imperial court situation was good. After Yuan Tingshan made a good start in Ji Bei, Tang Taizhuang, who was Gu Jintang's trusted general along with Kai Nan, also took the initiative to attack on the eastern line and beheaded 6,000 Beimang. For this reason, the Emperor of Liang ordered Tang Taizhuang to go to the capital to replace Lu Xingxiang as the assistant minister of the Ministry of War. This general, who had the reputation of fierce tiger general, came to the capital just after the other assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Su Gong, stepped into the Tu Liao. Therefore, after Wu Congxian and Fan Changho, the new chess saint of Liang, 10th Dan, were said to have entered the capital one after another, there was also the saying of Dragon General Su Gong and Fierce Tiger General, Dragon General Su Gong and Fierce Tiger General. Chapter 1420. Liang Imperial Court was flourishing with each passing day, and the people were reassured, which only served to accentuate the unrest in the northwest. It was rumored that after Beiliang Road lost Wagong and Wanhe, the last barrier outside the pass, Xiaoguang City, was also on the verge of collapse. Meanwhile, Huda City, the northernmost city outside Liangzhou Pass, was also in imminent danger. What made the people of Liang even more disappointed and angry was a rumor that Yozhou's Huda City, which was said to be able to hold off more than 100,000 Beimang cavalry, was said to be under the command of Yang Yuanzhan. Up until now, the 300,000 troops of Beimang had actually increased instead of decreasing. The people of Liang, especially the people of the capital, naturally began to speculate whether or not the Beiliang barbarians had thrown in their lot with the Beimang barbarians. Otherwise, how could there be more and more people fighting in this world? Huda City, which was north of Huaiyang Pass and south of Longyan Flat, had always been said to be the best. In Su Zhao's hands, he had placed as many as 30,000 troops in this majestic town. There were nearly 10,000 cavalry and more than 20,000 infantrymen. All of them were old soldiers who were good at fighting. In addition, there were Huaiyang Pass and Liuya and Fuling as support. Behind this line of defense, there were Jinyuan, Qinghe, and Zhongzhong passes, as well as Xiancan and Shenwu cities as the two flanks of defense. Behind them were the Great Snow Dragon Cavalry, Great Ancestor Gu's infantry, and He Zhonghu's cavalry. Unlike Yozhou's Huda city, which was passively taking a beating, to the north of Liangzhou, other than Huda city, Liuya, Fuling, and Huayang Pass, where the protectorate was located, all had the strength to mobilize cavalry. It was precisely because of this flexible and powerful fighting force roaming the rear that Huda city's defense was filled with the bravery of everyone facing death calmly. When Su Fengnian walked into the protectorate's conference hall under the escort of a group of white horses, Chu Lushan was in the middle of discussing the situation with Su Weisheng and the cavalry's deputy commander, He Zhonghu, and the others. Seeing Su Fengnian's arrival, they didn't exchange any pleasantries. Su Fengnian took the opportunity to join in without any delay. Of course, Chu Lushan couldn't completely ignore Su Fengnian, the king of Biyao. Therefore, he gave a brief summary. Cripple Lu of Huda city is arrogant. He said that he could defend Huda city alone for a year and a half without any problem. He asked us, Liuya, Fuling, and Huayang Pass, to launch an attack based on the premise that Huda city could not be lost. At the critical moment, the 10,000 elite cavalries in Huda city could even go out to fight at any time. Right now, we are calculating how Fatty Dong's 100,000 Dong family's private soldiers will be used, and when they will be used. Up until now, the northern Mang troops attacking the city are still the border soldiers from Gusai Prefecture. We've given them nearly 1,000 catapults in batches of 300, and they've been attacking the city day and night. It just looks very lively. Cripple Lu said that he wasn't used to it at first, but now, the Tiger Head city's defenders don't care about those disgusting catapults at night at all. They eat and sleep as usual, and there are no problems with their morale. At this point, Chu Lushan couldn't help but chuckle softly. All the armies are like crying children who want milk. They can't wait for a few dozen people to die before they talk about the situation as if it was a pile of eggs. Only our Biyao frontier army is an exception. We are afraid that our parents will be worried. Even if we are beaten until we are covered in blood, we will grit our teeth and bear it. Chu Lushan continued, Luya and Fu Ling's two cavalry armies have already taken the initiative to attack twice. The results of the battle weren't great, but they forced Northern Mang to not let loose and besiege the city. Otherwise, if those 1,000 stone catapults were to open up on all fronts, not to mention attacking Tiger Head City, even attacking Tai and City would be quite imposing. During this period, Beimang sent out a light cavalry of 30,000 men in an attempt to intercept Liuya's cavalry and give us an opportunity to attack Huayang Pass. They didn't succeed in besieging the city and attacking the reinforcements. Instead, we easily slaughtered 6,000 of them. If it wasn't for Dongzhou sending people to help us, we could have killed another 10,000 men. Our cavalry pushed northward to Huda city, and each of us threw out a barbarian's head. Your Highness, you didn't see the faces of those barbarians on the front lines. It was as if they hadn't been able to shit for months. Su Fengnian smiled knowingly and asked, how many casualties did Yang Yuanzhan suffer in Yuzhou? The veteran general He Zhong suddenly laughed heartily and said, there are already more than 50,000 casualties. In addition to the successful interception by Your Highness and Yulwandao with the Yochi, they may have added more than 100,000 men from Jinhe and Donghe, but they were actually just putting on a show. Those two prefectures should have been given to the two Liaodong lines. In the end, they used them so early. Beimang has a lot of controversy. Everyone is cursing the king of South Courtyard for robbing Peter to pay Paul. Some people have already suggested handing over the military power to Tuoba Bodhisattva. If it wasn't for the order of peace, Dong Zhuo might have already packed up his things and left. Su Fengnian looked at the sand table and nodded. He said softly, we don't need to rush to a decisive victory. We just need to wear down Beimang's patience bit by bit. The battlefield has always been an extension of the court. We should aim for this battle at the end of the second year of Xiangfu. If we succeed in fighting until Dong Zhuo loses the king of South Courtyard, it will be our Beiliang's victory. The following 3 years of Xiangfu will be much easier. Su Weisheng nodded quietly, agreeing with Su Fengnian's words. It was obvious that no fault is a merit and was extremely conservative. Chu Lushan glanced at Huda's city on the sand table. Then we must first ensure that Huda's city is not lost. We must not let Dongjua have a chance to breathe. Su Fengnian said calmly, therefore, even if Lu Jinu and Huda's city can't defend it, we must defend it. Send a message to him. In the past, Huda's city was used as the Great Wu Castle in Yuzhou. Now, it's different. He can die, but Huda's city cannot be lost. Therefore, whenever Huda's city is about to fall, no matter what method we use, we must immediately let the Protectorate know. Then, even if we have to use Jinyuan, Qinghe Heavy Tomb, and Xuanqin Shenwu, we must reduce the pressure on them. Even the 10,000 Great Snow Dragon Cavalry and the 8,000 Heavy Cavalry can be used at the critical moment. He Zhonghu and a few famous old generals looked at each other, wanting to say something but hesitating. In Beiliang's plan, after a certain amount of Beimang's military strength was depleted, all the Great Wu Castle and the 3 cities of Yuzhou could be lost. They could also lose North Pass Town in Liangzhou. There was no need to defend to the end at all costs. Was it worth it for Dongjua? Great Ancestor Gu closed his eyes and began to silently consider the battle situation and weigh the pros and cons. He Zhonghu unconsciously looked at Beiliang Protector General Chu Lushan. The great king of Beimang's south courtyard had once been defeated by him. Logically speaking, Chu Lushan should be the one to refute this suggestion. However, in He Zhonghu's eyes, Chu Lushan did not speak. Instead, he interlaced his fingers on his abdomen and quickly scanned the sand table. At this moment, when even Chu Lushan did not speak, probably only Su Weisheng dared to speak. She frowned and said, if the definition of Huda's city is changed, the entire defensive line of Liangzhou will change. This will have a huge impact on Lingzhou behind us. Su Fengnian replied, even if Su Beiji empties the entire Lingzhou and the area around Lingzhou, Liangzhou's provisions will not be affected. Great Ancestor Gu muttered to himself, fighting outside the country? Although this is Great Ancestor Gu's greatest dream, is it really suitable for Northern Liang, who has been sparing no effort to expand their territory? This was definitely the first time Su Fengnian had displayed such an unyielding stance on the matters of the border. The atmosphere in the Protector General's house was particularly solemn. Su Fengnian suddenly asked, Commander Yuan asked for the armor I wore at the time. He said it was the Protector General's idea? Su Weisheng's expression was strange. Chu Lushan chuckled and said, I originally wanted to display it in this hall to look imposing. Later on, I thought about it and had someone send it to Huda's city. Cripple Lu then gave it to someone else. Su Fengnian was confused. Chu Lushan withdrew his smile and said, he gave it to our first Beiliang general to die in battle. Su Fengnian lowered his head to look at the sand table. I know, it's Ma Ji from Huda's city. At the time, in the courtyard inside the city, he sat at the very back. Because he scolded me, he didn't dare show his face. Chapter 14:21. In the hall, except for Su Fengnian and Su Weisheng, the governor of Beiliang Chu Lushan, the cavalry commander Yuan Zuozong, the deputy commander Zhou Kong, and the infantry deputy commander Chu Lushan were the 4 people with the highest positions and the greatest authority. As for Su Fengnian's proposal to defend Huda's city to the death, neither Chu Lushan nor Yuan Zuozong expressed their opinions for the time being. It was Zhou Kong who argued with Great Ancestor Gu first. During the Spring and Autumn War, Great Ancestor Gu was famous for proposing the theory of the world situation and proposing that Southern Tang must fight outside the country as the policy of protecting the country. However, it was Great Ancestor Gu, who seemed to have a strong sense of attack, who disagreed and did not agree with the Beiliang frontier army to help Lu Jina defend Huda's city to the death. On the contrary, it was Zhou Kong, who came from the Partridge headquarters camp, who agreed with Su Fengnian's point of view. Great Ancestor Gu did not care that Su Fengnian was on the spot and said mercilessly, this kind of hasty change of strategy is more harmful to the Beiliang frontier army than the change of generals. How can the national affairs be trifled with? Zhou Kong also argued, water is impermanent, and soldiers have no solid formation. What's wrong with waiting for an opportunity to act? In addition to the rhetorical question, Zhou Kong said something meaningful. When we made the military strategy of Beiliang in Yuliangliang province, the the general and Li Shan were still there. At that time, the original intention was that Beimang would go south to the Central Plains through Beiliang and Jizhou. The Beimang barbarians only regarded Beiliang as an impregnable city. Even if they could not go around the city directly, they would only place 500,000 to 600,000 soldiers here to impede our Beiliang frontier army, instead of attacking the 3 provinces of Yuliangliu province today. Strategies and rules are dead, but our Beiliang soldiers are alive. The more than 100,000 border cavalry in Liangzhou are not to be trifled with. Zhou Kong kept saying, our Beiliang, and mentioned Beiliang's early military and border cavalry. The old general's meaning was obvious. Great ancestor Gu was an outsider who came late, but he was only the second in command of the infantry. Beiliang respected the cavalry, even more so in Liangzhou, so great ancestor Gu should be sensible at this time and place. In fact, the army was similar to the imperial court. Great ancestor was ranked army was not only ranked, but also paid attention to family background. In Beiliang, those captains and generals who joined the cavalry camp from the infantry had to take a long time to get along with each other. The northern Liang border army naturally had no objections to great ancestor Gu, who had been promoted by Su Fengnian. Su Fengnian frowned, but didn't say anything. Great ancestor Gu didn't turn hostile on the spot, but his expression didn't look good either. He said coldly, I'm just stating facts. No one denies that our border cavalry in Beiliang isn't strong enough. We only have strong combat power, but it doesn't mean that our leaders and soldiers can be squandered. War on the battlefield is like a game of chess. A national player who only knows how to play the game of chess, even if he can conquer an orphan or even slay a dragon, will lose more than gain in the overall situation. I don't want Beiliang's army to be a chess player who has the strength of a 10th Dan national player but only the vision of a 6th Dan chess player. Beiliang now controls 4 provinces, and there are hundreds of cities, military towns, strategic passes, and impregnable passes in these 4 provinces. Don't you need to weigh the pros and cons of using Huda city as a chess piece to decide the survival of more than 100 chess pieces? Zhou Kong clicked his tongue and said, why do I feel like it's Qin Jibao talking? Great ancestor Gu finally said angrily, you bastard. Today, in front of General Zhou and the king of Beiliang, I'll tell you that the Beiliang army shouldn't deny Qin Jibao. Even the king of Beiliang has clearly proposed that the essentials of military preparation shouldn't be banned in the border army. Why can't you have a copy of it in your Liangzhou cavalry army? Zhou Kong, do you want to learn from Zhong Hongwu and be an impenetrable leader of the border army? You've disliked me for a long time, and I've disliked you for a long time, too. Usually, the commander of the cavalry army, Yuan Zhuozong, would be a peacemaker. He would even help great ancestor Gu, an outsider, to reunite the family. He was like a mother-in-law. When his son quarreled with his daughter-in-law, he would really help his son by helping his daughter-in-law. But today, since Su Fengnian was here, Yuan Zhuozong practiced the silent meditation and relaxed his mind. Chu Lushan was full of mischievous tricks, and he beamed as he watched the 2 vice-marshals blush with interest. Su Fengnian said calmly, those who are qualified to discuss here are all level 3 and level 2 officials. It's time to talk openly. But in the case of Huda city, we can find loopholes and fill in the gaps. But the decision to guard it for a year will not change. This sentence was said to great ancestor Gu. Then Su Fengnian said to Zhou Kong, don't ban Qin Jibao's military supplies. General Zhou, after you go back, take the lead to copy a volume. Including the commandant, all the lieutenants and generals can't be exempted. After you copy it, send it to the protectorate of Beiliang. I'll review it myself. Whoever asks someone to write it for him or refuses to copy it, I'll go to your army and have a talk with him. If we can't reach an agreement, I'll send him to Yuzhou as an infantryman. Zhou Kong had a bitter expression as he carefully haggled, Your Highness, that book has over 100,000 words, and a single volume has close to 10,000 words. Right now, the war is in full swing, so why don't we wait until we have time? Su Fengnian said with a fake smile, then let's have a talk first. Do you want to drink some wine and ask my second sister to cook some dishes to go with the wine? After we eat and drink enough, General Zhou can go to Yuzhou. Zhou Kong hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, "No, no, I'll stay up late to copy the book. Those lieutenants and commandants under my command will finish copying it within 10 days. After the 2 deputy commanders of infantry and cavalry left the protectorate of Biyao and went to their respective cities, Yuan Zhuozong said with a smile, "It turns out that each of them will be beaten 50 times. Su Fengnian said worriedly, "Zhou Kong was beaten 50 times, but great ancestor Gu may feel that he was beaten 500 times. Yuan Zhuozong asked, "Do we need to stop him and have a private talk with him?" General Gu is not that kind of stubborn person. As long as it makes sense, he will listen to it. Su Fengnian was a little helpless, but the problem is that I don't have the confidence to make sense. At that time, it will add fuel to the fire and make great ancestor Gu more insistent. It's better to be like now. I'm deliberately mystifying him. Great ancestor Gu doesn't know whether I'm selling elixirs or dogskin plasters. He can only pinch his nose and do as I say. Su Fengnian saw that there were only his second sister, second brother Yuan and Chu Lushan in the hall. He said with a wry smile, "Now we are family. Finally, I don't have to pretend to be a master." In addition to laughing at the 2 old generals, Chu Lushan's eyes were more on the sand table. In fact, the Protector General of Biyao had always been famous for his political and military achievements. He had always been looked down upon and underestimated by the entire Central Plains imperial court. Especially after the older generation of the Central Plains passed away one after another, Chu Lushan was only occasionally mentioned by people because he led thousands of cavalry to Shu province. Compared with Yan Wenluan and Chen Jibao, he was much inferior. He was even inferior to Yuan Zhuozong, who showed his brilliance in the Battle of the Princess Tomb. At that time, people were very shocked that Chu Lushan, who was only a level 4 official, was appointed as the Protector General of Biyao. However, the Biyao army and its archenemy, Beimang, were not surprised. From this, it could be seen that the Liang imperial court generally did not care about Biyao. What the eye did not see, the heart did not feel troubled. Chu Lushan had a saying that was widely spread among the upper echelons of the Biyao frontier army. From the first time this fatty saw the sand table, he was intoxicated. In his early years, whether there was a war or not, he liked to stare at the sand tables of various countries in a daze. No one knew what was so interesting about these things. It was only when Wu Su asked him once that Chu Lushan told the truth. He said, "It is the same principle as reading a book. After reading a book 100 times, its meaning will be revealed." Later on, when the Su and Zhao separated from each other, Chu Lushan's home in Biyao had no less than 100 sand tables of various sizes. It was rumored that the largest one took up the entire building. There was no place to stand on the first floor. If one wanted to see the sand table, one had to go straight up the stairs to the second floor to look down. Chu Lushan looked at the sand table at the northernmost city of Liangzhou, Huda City, and then at the southernmost city of Yuzhou, Xiaguang City. He softly said, "It's not that Huda City can't be defended for a year. I've thought of a reason that might be able to convince great ancestor Gu." Chapter 1422. Chu Lushan continued, choosing Dongzhuo from Beimang as the king of the South Courtyard and mobilizing millions of troops from the beginning to attack Biyao in 3 different directions meant that Beimang had completely given up the idea of attacking the south from Jizhou and Liao. It also meant that there must be loopholes in the strategy we made back then. What we need to do is not just to mend it, but to completely destroy it in some places. Biyao also predicted the worst situation at the beginning, but at that time, it was like fighting against an enemy. Well, for example, it was like fighting against the old god of sword Li Chungang. We guessed that the old man might use the green dragon sleeves or the sword opening heaven gate as soon as he came up. Su Wisheng whispered, "At that time, we only thought that he was one of the 2 strongest men, but we didn't expect that he would use both at the same time." Chu Lushan continued, "That's good. The fiercer the battle in Huda City is, the more dangerous the defense line in Liangzhou is, and the greater our chance to win by surprise will be." Back then, Yuan Zhuozong suddenly smiled and said, Chu Lushan disagreed with the strategy made by Li Yishan back then. He thought it was too righteous and only thought about how not to lose, instead of how to win. Chu Lushan smiled. Now that I think about it, we had to do that at that time. Without more than 20 years of blanking, there would be no room for leeway today. Chu Lushan slowly raised his head and looked at Su Fengnian. Then, a dazzling and flattering smile blossomed on his face. He chuckled and said, "Your Highness gave me the idea. Otherwise, with this little brain of mine, would not have been able to think of it even if I cracked my skull." Perhaps only at this time could people think of Lu Qiu, or who competed with Li Gongda for the title of the best flatterer in Biyao. Su Fengnian laughed and scolded, "Be serious." Chu Lushan continued to be nonchalant. "Didn't your Highness think of it long ago? It's just that the risk is too high and you know that great ancestor Gu won't agree." Su Fengnian nodded. Su Wisheng watched the mouth of Yuzhou province on the sand table as he said, "It's hard to attack." Su Fengnian said in a deep voice, "As for whether it will be difficult to defend or easy to defend, we have given Beimang a chance." Yuan Zuozong squinted his eyes and said, "Therefore, Beimang gave up the opportunity to attack all the fortresses with Luanhe City and Wobo City as the core." Fortunately, Qi Danghua, who was also one of Su Zhao's foster sons like Yuan Zuozong and Chu Lushan, was not present. Otherwise, he would have a headache about why he was so stupid. Su Fengnian muttered to himself. Beimang was aiming to flatten Beilyang and then rush to the Central Plains. The civil officials of the Taiping Order were to be used in Jizhou, Hezhou, and the following Huainan province. They didn't plan to waste them in Beilyang. Under this type of situation, Yozhou's unwillingness to fight to the death and Northern Mang's unwillingness to surrender made it so that after Yang Yuanzhan's army paid a tremendous price to break through Crouching Bao and Luanhe City's defenses, the Wu Castle strongholds around Crouching Bao and Luanhe City were almost completely destroyed. Of course, from the current situation, the pros and cons are half and half. The good thing is that it will make it easier for Northern Mang's cavalry to move about within the calabash. However, if we place Northern Mang's most powerful counterattack in Yuzhou, then Yang Yuanzhan's 35 great army that had just received reinforcements will suffer. Chu Lushan added, "If we want to reverse the situation and force Yang Yuanzhan to retreat, we have to invest at least 50,000 of our most elite cavalry. We have to succeed in one battle. We have to wipe out Yang Yuanzhan's elite cavalry at the critical moment. Therefore, we must not lose Huda City. If we lose Huda City, we will lose Liuya and Fuling cities, as well as Huayang Pass. Once we pull the battlefront back to the Qingyuan Heavy Tomb region and allow Dong Zhuo's army to comfortably push southward and spread out the battlefront, it will be difficult for us to even have 5,000 cavalrymen, let alone 50,000. Therefore, for the sake of Huda City, we might have to sacrifice 40 to 50,000 people in the second year of Jianghu City. However, for the sake of Huda City, many of them will die." Chu Lushan revealed a gloomy smile as he stared at the mouth of Huda City on the sand table. "If all 35,000 people die here, we'll have built a huge Jingguan temple." Yuan Zuozong sneered, "It's as good as West Rampart." Su Fengnian took a deep breath before saying, "Second brother Yuan, but if so..." Before Su Fengnian finished his words, Yuan Baixiong, who was always serious in speech and manner, said softly for the first time, "We're family." Chu Lushan suddenly wanted to put his arm around Yuan Zuozong's shoulder with a flattering look. However, Yuan Zuozong slapped his hand away, saying, "I'm not familiar with you." Chu Lushan scolded, "I'm just a little fatter. Prince is just a little more handsome. Why do you judge people by appearance?" Su Fengnian laughed, "Stop. You're not a little fatter, and I'm not a little more handsome." Su Wisheng looked at the aggrieved and long-winded Protector General, the King of Beilyang with a gentle smile, and Yuan Baixiong who was full of heroic spirit. She also laughed. Unexpectedly, great ancestor Gu and Zhou Kong did not leave Huayang Pass immediately. Instead, they drank in a restaurant with little business. Zhou Kong waited for the dishes to be served with a straight face. "What? Do you think you haven't quarreled enough in the Protector General's office?" "Surnamed Gu, I'm more than willing to drink and chat with the prince when he's free. However, I can't drink or piss in the same pot with you." Great ancestor Gu laughed, "It's just that today is different from the past. If you were a general of Southern Tang in the past, I would have knocked you down with a punch if you dared to talk like this." When I beat you down and you can't say anything, I'll be the only one who can say anything unreasonable." When Zhou Kong heard these coarse words, he didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed. "Quarreling is one thing. I don't like you, great ancestor Gu, but I, Zhou Kong, have never denied that you did things very manly in southern Tang. Otherwise, even if I couldn't stop you from becoming the deputy commander of the infantry, I would have taken the lead to cause trouble at Prince's side. In the end, I would have troubled you. However, to be honest, you're just lucky. It was Gu Jiantang who attacked southern Tang. If it were me, Bailiang, even if you really fought at the gate of the country to defend it, it would still be useless." Great ancestor Gu poured himself a cup of wine and laughed softly. "Whether you believe it or not, being the deputy commander in Bailiang, no matter how much you old generals dislike me, is still much more comfortable than fighting the enemy in southern Tang. It is because I understand that outside of the battlefield, your cavalry army might not see eye to eye with me, but if we really fight, if 10,000 people have to die for me, great ancestor Gu, the infantry vice commander, then you definitely won't only lose 9,000 people. For a general, there's nothing more comfortable in the world than this. Therefore, the worse you scold me, the more I want to treat you to a drink, so that one day, we won't have to visit each other's graves." Zhou Kong couldn't help but laugh. "In the end, great ancestor Gu just wants to be happy for yourself?" Great ancestor Gu laughed. "If I'm not happy for myself and you scold me, do you think I'd be willing to stick my hot face to your cold butt? You're just a deputy commander, but your position is higher than mine." Zhou Kong was stunned and sighed. "Let's just drink today and not talk about military affairs. Anyway, we won't be able to reach an agreement. We can't piss into the same pot, but according to what you said, I think there's no problem drinking a pot of wine." In the end, the two old men were dead drunk. During this period, Zhou Kong and great ancestor Gu cursed at each other for a long time. This made the shopkeeper of the restaurant, who knew the prominent identity of the two, tremble with fear. He was afraid that the two big shots would fight because of a disagreement. At that time, their personal guards outside the restaurant would be attracted. Wouldn't his small restaurant be torn down easily? However, at the same time, the restaurant manager, who was still a soldier, also felt honored. These two were the deputy commanders of Bailiang's army. Who didn't know that any deputy commander of Bailiang was more than enough to be a general in Liang imperial court? In a small courtyard of Su Weisheng's temporary residence in the protectorate office, Su Fengnian took out the two chess boxes from his bag. However, Su Weisheng didn't want them, saying that she didn't need them. Su Fengnian could only put them away resentfully. After a moment of silence, Su Fengnian squatted beside Su Weisheng's wheelchair and sighed softly. "After going through Jianghu 3 times, I finally understand why you didn't want me to struggle in Jianghu." Su Weisheng asked, "Why do you say that?" Su Fengnian smiled and said, "People in Jianghu want to live a meaningful life. As Su Zhao's son, I probably want to live a meaningful life." Su Weisheng shook her head and said, "Don't flatter me, and don't boast about yourself. From the beginning to the end, I just want you to live well. It's that simple. Our mother, father, your master, and even Yuan Zuozong and Chu Lushan didn't want you to die a meaningful life. They would rather you live a meaningless life." Su Fengnian sighed and said, "I see." Chapter 1423. There's one more chapter in the afternoon and one more in the evening. It's not that I'm splitting it up on purpose. The earlier I upload it, the earlier I can read it. Moreover, each chapter will definitely have at least 4,000 to 5,000 words. P.S. A lot of foreshadowing, but in the end, it will become a magnificent battle. After Su Fengnian arrived at Huayang Pass, Su Weisheng went south to return to Mount Qingliang the next day. The remaining Su Fengnian also began to live in seclusion, not interfering in the affairs of the protectorate. Qi Danghua, who was stationed on the Qingyuan front line, would occasionally ride his horse over to relieve Su Fengnian's boredom. The two would often leave the pass together under the banner of hunting. They would bring several hundred elite cavalry to approach Huda's city and watch the flames and smoke of battle from a distance. If they encountered a small group of Beimang horses, they would be treated as an appetizer for Qi Danghua's white feather guards, who were the most skilled in cavalry and archery in the Bailiang frontier army. The protectorate naturally didn't dare to raise any objections to this. They only secretly scattered many crossbowmen on white horses outside the pass to guard against any accidents. On this day, it was the spring equinox. Thunder roared, wheat sprouted, and the sun rose. A total of 42,000 Li Su Fengnian rode out alone in the early morning. In order not to burden the protectorate and the crossbowmen, he didn't go north to Huda City. Instead, he leisurely headed east to Fuling City. One of the 50 or so crossbowmen on guard duty didn't dare to disturb the king of Biyang's relaxation. However, probably because he wanted to personally witness the elegance of Su Fengnian, one of the 4 great grandmasters of the world, the commander of the archery team also put in some thought. He allowed the 50 or so riders under his command to have the opportunity to move to within 200 paces of Su Fengnian. However, after that, they had to quickly retreat, otherwise they would be dealt with according to military law. Su Fengnian didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he just pretended that he didn't see anything. Su Fengnian looked up at the clear sky and suddenly laughed. When he was young, he didn't understand why a cloudless sky was considered good weather. He always felt that the clouds floating in the sky were beautiful, especially the fiery clouds. When he was young, in the prison-like Dantong Pass, he would be happy for several days every time he saw the clouds. Together with the little beggar who he only knew was Zhao Zhu a long time later, the 2 children could watch the clouds for hours without feeling bored. Ever since they parted, Su Fengnian was always worried that the little beggar wouldn't be able to find food and that he might starve or freeze to death on the street one day. He didn't expect to reunite with the little beggar many years later at the Spring God Lake. All these years, the little beggar had been living well. However, the little beggar had suddenly become His Royal Highness, the Lord of Southern Jianghu. Su Fengnian suddenly stopped his horse and turned his head to the south. In the distance, 4 riders were heading north. When they saw Su Fengnian's figure, they spurred their horses and headed straight for him. Before they arrived, the commander of the crossbowmen on the white horse came to Su Fengnian's side first. He got off his horse and saluted respectfully. "Your Highness, the 4 riders should be Jianghu people who were selected by the Fish Dragon gang to join the army at the border. Do you want me to stop them?" Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "No, you can retreat to Huayang Pass first." The commander of the archery team accepted the order without hesitation. Although they were sent by the protectorate, it was obvious who was the most powerful person in Biyao and who the 300,000 border soldiers should listen to. Moreover, who was the prince? Did he really need crossbowmen to protect him? However, after the sturdy commander mounted his horse, he said shyly for the first time, "Your Highness, if I may be so bold as to say, we've all heard about what happened outside Gourd Mouth in Yuzhou. If there's a chance in the future, all of the crossbowmen in Liangzhou would like to fight side by side with Your Highness." Su Fengnian smiled and nodded. The commander of the archery team patted his horse and left excitedly. He was someone who had spoken to the king of Biyao. If he went back and told the commandant and those bastards, wouldn't they be jealous? After galloping for several hundred steps, the commander of the archery team looked back. Looking at the figure of the man and his horse, he thought, "Our prince is really the most romantic person in the world. He's also so amiable and approachable. If he were in the Central Plains, how many young girls would die for him?" The commander of the archery team immediately felt indignant. Although he had heard that Mount Qingliang already had 2 potential princesses who had not yet been officially married and had good reputations, it was still too few. Once the crossbowmen were far away, the 4 riders quickly arrived. When they saw Su Fengnian, the leader of the riders was a white-haired but hale and hearty old man. The old man with the sword on his back sized him up and asked with a smile, "Does little brother know where Huayang Pass is?" Su Fengnian smiled and pointed out the way for the old man. The old man cupped his hands and thanked Su Fengnian before he introduced himself. He had a heroic spirit of Jianghu. "I'm from Qingsong County in Jiangnan. My Jianghu friends have given me the nickname, Sky Drum. May I ask if little brother is like us, someone who has come to the Biyao border to join the army?" Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "I'm originally from the border army. My father's generation has already settled down in Biyao." The old man nodded and said, "I see. I've been rude. The old man smiled helplessly and said with some self-mockery, "It's not that I'm a chatterbox. It's just that the four of us are unfamiliar with this place. When I heard that the Baimang barbarian army of 1,000,000 was coming south to knock on the pass, I followed my father and master to Ji Bay when I was young and killed the barbarians beyond the Great Wall. Now, I couldn't hold back my anger and heard that the Fish Dragon Gang, one of the top 10 gangs in the world, could recommend us outsiders to the Baliang frontier army. So, I brought 3 disciples to Baliang. The Fish Dragon Gang only gave us 4 temporary travel permits and we suffered a lot on the way north." One of the young men with a long sword on his waist said angrily, "Master, when we met the Baliang frontier army, they were confident in their combat power. What's the difference between the way they looked at us and the way they looked at the barbarians?" Su Fengmian's 3 trips to Jianghu were not in vain. He immediately understood the meaning behind it. It must be that this group of people relied on their martial arts and had a conflict with the Baliang frontier army. Otherwise, they would not have used the prefix, confident in their combat power. Instead, they would have directly pointed out the latter sentence. However, what Su Fengmian was curious about was that the Fish Dragon Gang had opened their doors to recruit people from Jianghu. This was originally instructed by Wu Tong'an and Fu Shuifang. However, most of them were low-level masters who were opportunistic and could not survive in Liang Jianghu, so they fled to Baliang to find a place to stay. There were only 16 people who were willing to go to Baliang's border to join the army, and those who had some foundation in martial arts were clearly recorded in the Governor-General's office. However, this old swordsman, who Su Fengmian had never heard of before, was a real master of the realm of master. This kind of master could easily establish a sect on Liang Jianghu and become a leader in the martial arts world of a county. It was not difficult for him to go to the capital's Ministry of Justice and get a carp bag to hang around his waist. Su Fengmian casually observed the 4 riders. Other than the level 2 master's gaze, the other 3 people each had their own merits. The young man with a sword at his waist had an arrogant attitude. He had long heard that Baliang had many talented disciples. This stranger who appeared at the border of the Great Wall for no reason and was not wearing armor and carrying a sword was most likely one of them. The middle-aged swordsman should be the eldest disciple of the master of martial arts in Jiangnan. He was relatively mature and prudent. He discreetly sized up Su Fengmian's hand, trying to find clues that he had once practiced martial arts. He had a lot of experience in Jianghu and did not believe that there would be an ordinary person riding alone in the vicinity when hundreds of thousands of Baimang soldiers were attacking Huda city. As for the last woman in black who wore a veil hat to cover her face, she was also curiously examining the man in front of her who did not look like a Baliang. He looked more like a young master from a Jiangnan noble family. Su Fengmian smiled and said, "It doesn't matter what other people think. I just have to be myself. If you really want to talk about things with your eyes, haven't you been looking at us, Baliang, for 20 years since you left Yang dynasty?" The young swordsman probably could barely stand the arrogance of the Baliang frontier army, but he could not stand the arrogance of a Baliang disciple of the same age. He immediately became angry. "The 4 of us came to Baliang in the middle of nowhere to join the army. We came to break through enemy lines and kill the enemy, not to listen to the mocking and ridicule of people like you. If it weren't for the fact that my master and the second guest of Mount Hui, Hong Yu, were close friends." The old man's expression was stern. He stopped his disciple from continuing to speak without fear. Chong He. Chapter 14:24. The young man called Chong He turned his head away and silently sulked. In the Jianghu of Jiangnan, he had always been a cultured and refined gentleman of the sword. He shouldn't have been so rude and disrespectful. However, now that he was outside the barren Baliang Pass, he often rode his horse for a day without seeing anyone. He was not acclimatized to the environment and was unbearably sullen. Thinking back to his hometown in the Central Plains, it should be a beautiful season in the misty rain. There would be alleys selling apricot flowers, boating on lakes, and dancing in brothels all night long. Even if he didn't do anything, it was still enjoyable to practice martial arts with his martial brothers and sisters in the deep courtyard of his home. It was better than drinking wind and eating sand and being bullied in the northwest border. Su Fengmian smiled and asked, "How about I lead the way for you?" The young man immediately muttered, being unaccountably solicitous, he definitely doesn't have good intentions. Isn't he still having bad intentions towards my sister? The old man glared at his disciple, who was shooting his mouth off. He then turned to Su Fengnian. Without being pretentious, he laughed heartily and said, "That's just as well. When we reach the Great Wall and hand over the travel pass, I'll definitely treat little brother to a few jeans of green ant wine. To tell you the truth, I have long heard of this wine. However, when I tasted it in the past, the taste. I don't dare to compliment it. I didn't think that now that I am in Biyao, the more I drink, the more I can't put it down. I bought 2 pounds of wine at Longkou Pass in Liangzhou and it was empty in less than 2 days. Now the wine worm in my stomach is revolting fiercely." The 5 of them traveled together. The old man and Su Fengnian chatted about Beiliang's local customs. They had a tacit understanding not to ask about each other's identities. It was a big taboo to talk about such things with strangers. However, the young swordsman quickly couldn't hold himself back. His voice was neither soft nor loud, just loud enough for Su Fengnian to hear. He said, "Sister, the founding emperor of the Great Feng dynasty once wrote a letter to the master of the grasslands. He said, 'To the north and west of Jizhou, the place where the bow is drawn is under your command. And to the south and east of Jizhou, the crown and belt are to be built by me. Tens of thousands of people will plow and weave, my subjects and lords will live in peace, and there will be no tyranny.'" The young woman's voice was gentle. "Senior brother, didn't you say that when you first entered Biyao?" In front, Su Fengnian laughed and said, "This is for me, a Biyao barbarian from the west of Ji province." The old man who was running side by side with Su Fengnian smiled knowingly. "Little brother, you're so magnanimous." Su Fengnian joked, "It's because I've been holding it in bit by bit. Otherwise, I would have suffered internal injuries." That young man named Chong, he was obviously seriously injured. Su Fengnian suddenly said, "The Hongyu you are familiar with, is it the Hongyu who recently became the deputy general of the Rouge Heavy Cavalry?" The old man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "That's him." Su Fengnian laughed. "Senior, you've already handed over your travel permit at the protectorate. You'll have to go south again for a while, to the grave, to find General Hong. At that time, I'll ask someone to lead the way for you. Otherwise, you really might not be able to see General Hong. It's not that we Biyao are narrow-minded. It's just that General Hong's current position is very special. Not to mention you, even many of the Biyao frontier army generals with real power can't easily see those heavy cavalry." Then the old man and Su Fengnian looked at each other and smiled. They didn't need to say anything. Then the two talked about interesting stories of the Central Plains Jianghu. The old man was very knowledgeable and talkative. He talked about the current situation of Mount Hui, about the Rouge Heavy Cavalry's civil and military evaluations, and about the general evaluations. He couldn't suppress his exultation. "With little brother's insight, I'm sure you know why I put the general evaluations at the end. The general evaluations include Liang, Beimang, and Biyao, while the general evaluations only include Liang. This is probably the most important evaluation since the fall of the Great Feng dynasty. There are 10 people in the general evaluations. There are 4 in Liang, Chen Zhibao, Chao Changqing, Gu Jiantang, and Lu Xingxiang. Beimang has 3, Dong Zhua, Lu Gui, and Yang Yuanzan. Biyao has Yan Wenluan, Chu Lushan, and great ancestor Gu. At the end of the general evaluations, there are additional comments on Xia Shibian, Ko Jianghuai, Tuoba Qiyun, Zhong Tan, and Song Li. Su Fengnian joked, "Yuan Zuozong didn't make the list." "I'm not convinced." Perhaps the young swordsman didn't like Su Fengnian, so he couldn't help but argue, Biyao is still not satisfied. There are 3 people in the general evaluations. If you add Chen Zhibao, who rode into Shu alone, there are 4. That's almost half of the rankings. In addition, there's the young king of vassal state who became one of the 4 grandmasters. There's also Su Yanbing who suddenly appeared. As for the evaluations, there's also Beiliang's junior guardian Chen Wang and Sun Yin. They're on the same level as Yin Mao Chun. What else does Biyao want? Su Fengnian smiled calmly. That's why Biyao is a good place. Not only do we have barbarians, but we also have scholars who can turn the tide and help the people. That guy instantly suffered another internal injury. The woman in the hat covered her mouth and smiled. The old man sighed. For so many years, this old man has always been puzzled by one thing. With Biyao's manpower and material resources, how can they support the 300,000 cavalry at the border? Su Fengnian said softly, in order to compete with Beimang, the Liang army claims to have 800,000 cavalry. It's more than the Dafeng dynasty at its peak, half in Biyao and half in Liang. For some reason, when the four of them heard this, their eyes were filled with the monotonous and desolate scenery of the northwest. They couldn't help but have a complicated feeling. As they approached the Huayang Pass, Su Fengnian asked, "Senior, if you didn't know Hong Yu, who was a general in Biyao, would you still come to Biyao?" The old man was stunned and said calmly, "Of course not." Su Fengnian nodded slightly. His expression didn't change. However, the old man soon smiled and said, "But since Su Zhao's death, the muddled account of unrighteous spring and autumn has come to an end. I believe this old man isn't the only one who thinks this way. Many people of the older generation think the same way." Since that young man's surname Su said those words in Tai and city, as long as they didn't have a blood feud with him, many of the knots in their hearts were untied. After entering Biyao, this old man heard a lot of things and realized that many things were very different from what he imagined. In the future, he'll find time to write to his old friends in his hometown and tell them about a different Biyao. It turns out that here, there's also the sound of books, the sound of chickens and dogs, and... When the old man said this, he couldn't help but laugh. There's also the wine cellar who makes me regret that I didn't come 30 or 40 years earlier. Su Fengnian said seriously, "Cold women are just like the green ant wine that burns like fire in the mouth. Once you're addicted to it, it'll be hard to change to another wine in your life." The young man snorted and said, "Then why did your king of Biyao marry 2 women from other places?" Su Fengnian was speechless for a moment. After a moment of silence, he turned his head and said helplessly, "This time, I admit defeat because your swordsmanship is unparalleled." At first, the young man looked smug. Then, he put on a cold face. But soon, the corners of his mouth curled up. When he looked at this abominable Biyao son again, he didn't seem so annoying. The Huayang Pass that appeared in the vision of the 5 riders was different from Huda's city and Liuya Fuling. Since it was named Pass, it meant that one man could hold the pass against 10,000 men. It also meant that once the smoke of war rose, this place would become a battlefield for the military. Most of the passes mentioned in military books were like this. No matter the size, as long as one wanted to cross the border quickly, one had to take down these passes that were built on the roads and strategic locations. Only then could one drive straight in without any worries. On the contrary, there were many majestic cities and huge towns that looked very awe-inspiring, but once the battle began, they could very well circle around the city. There were many such cities in the Liang defense line, but this didn't mean that their appearance was meaningless. On the contrary, although their existence didn't have much of an effect in stopping the enemy's army, their existence itself was a type of deterrent. To the northern Mang, they were a type of chicken ribs. If they attacked, they would suffer heavy losses. If they circled around, their supplies would be in danger. However, all the cities were rooted and unmoving. Generals and military strategies were flexible. When the time came, it would depend on who was stronger and who was stronger. Biyao was lacking in depth. The most tragic thing about it was that every inch of its territory was a place of death where blood would flow. Since Beimang attacked Biyao with the power of the entire country, it was under the premise that Biyao would force them to fight for territory inch by inch. They still had to rely on their national strength to crush them. At this time, Su Fengnian outside the Huayang Pass was a little worried. He wasn't worried about the aggressive Beimang army. Instead, he was thinking about the farmer's proverb that every second of the wheat in the spring equinox was worth 1,000 gold. He thought about how many Biyao people would have a shortage of food this year. He thought about the children who were still in private school when he passed through the Tuma Pass. They would probably be even more envious of the thin skin but filled meat buns. At this time, the graceful woman with the hat on her head held back her shyness and quietly stared at the man whose name she didn't know. There was only one thought in her mind that made her embarrassed. If only he was the young great-grandmaster that she yearned for day and night, if only he was the king of Biyao that many of her close friends in her hometown adored. When they heard that she was coming to Biyao, many of the noble ladies who only knew how to do needlework, who were usually gentle and graceful, almost eloped with her. Her master laughed and said that this kind of scene that made all the men in the world beat their chests and stamp their feet was probably only seen many years ago when Li Chungang roamed the Jianghu with a sword. Now, how many people didn't miss the beautiful women in Jiangnan? Chapter 1425. During the spring equinox of the second year of Xiangfu, if it was said that no one cared about the increasingly intense war in the northwest, then the situation of Guangling Road, which was originally going well, suddenly took a turn for the worse, making the capital of Liang very worried. All of this originated from the young man at the western border of Xie. After the soldiers on the eastern front of Guangling had gotten used to Ko Jianghuai's mysterious movements, the main general Song Li slowly pushed forward step by step, continuously reducing the space for the West Chu army to perform. Not only did he take back all of the lost land, he also successfully instigated a number of West Chu officers who had rebelled at that time. He compressed the 20,000 infantrymen of West Chu's main force to the front line of Dangyin River and Crow Cry Valley. At that time, not only did Song Li's army have 30,000 Guangling Road infantrymen, there were also 8,000 elite cavalry who were good at fighting as a mobile force. In addition, Song Li had always been steady in commanding troops. No matter how one looked at it, it was a situation where victory was in the bag. The only problem was whether or not they could break into the old capital of West Chu before Lixia. But it was at this moment where victory was at their fingertips that the inferior Xia Shibians suddenly began to exert force, taking the initiative to attack. Afterwards, it was rumored that Song Li's cavalry moved out in full force, wanting to use several thousand cavalry to thin out the enemy's formation. Using the grassland nomadic cavalry's best move, the 8,000 cavalry were divided into 3 groups, and each group was divided into 5 horizontal groups. The nomadic cavalry was at the front, and the elite cavalry was at the back. Facing the enemy's rear, the elite cavalry quickly passed through the gaps and charged forward, launching a projectile attack. Then, under the situation where the battle line was neat and tidy, the elite cavalry retreated, and the light cavalry retreated in turn. But Xie Shibian only had 5,000 strong, heavily armored infantrymen, holding Mo swords more than 10 feet long, to form a dense horizontal formation at the front. Ignoring the arrows, they advanced like a wall. When the shrinking Guangling cavalry had no choice but to launch a true charge, facing these heavily armored infantrymen who were like great halberds of West Chu, it was actually a phrase that made the officials of the Ministry of War of Taiyan City look at each other in dismay. Men and horses will be crushed when they meet them. Then, the scattered remnants of the cavalry could only use their own infantry to circle out of the battlefield. What followed was an even more tragic infantry battle. Although the Guangling infantry, whose morale had hit rock bottom, did not retreat, it was still difficult to stop West Chu's advance. The main general, Song Li, did not hesitate to personally charge into the formation, leading 800 men to break through West Chu's Mo sword formation. Even so, in the following battle, Xie Shibian, who had been jokingly called by the Liang imperial court before the battle, even the cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice, repeatedly mobilized troops that had been biding their time to enter the battlefield. There were less than 1,000 of them, but all of them accurately remedied a few dangerous situations. Song Li was not a mediocre general, fighting bravely. Twice, he led troops to within 100 steps of Xie Shibian's formation and was forced back by arrows. Afterwards, Xie Shibian used the thousands of cavalry hidden in ambush to charge into the formation. Song Li had long prepared for this. Even though the battle was at a stalemate, he still strictly ordered the cavalry that had suffered heavy losses not to enter the battle formation lightly, to support his side. He only allowed the cavalry captains to lead 500 cavalry to take turns killing the enemy. This was the only way to prevent the Guangling cavalry and infantry from collapsing in one battle under the charge of the 3,000 West Chu cavalry. The two armies of West Chu and Guangling fought from noon to dusk. Corpses were strewn all over the field. Xie Shibian's 20,000 infantry had suffered more than 15,000 casualties. When Song Li's 40,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry finally retreated from the battlefield, there were less than 5,000 people left who could still fight. However, the truth that truly made the soldiers on both sides feel a chill run down their spines was that when Song Li took the initiative to retreat more than 10 li away from the battlefield, Xie Shi sent out 3,000 light cavalry that seemed to have descended from the heavens. Meanwhile, the ones who stopped this cavalry from expanding their pursuit were the 5,000 ambushes that Song Li also wanted to use to win by surprise. The Liang imperial court, in the court meeting after the urgent memorials arrived in the capital, all heavily criticized Song Li, saying that he was muddle-headed in his use of troops and that he had a great advantage but was not able to control the situation. The emperor was furious and ordered Song Li to go to the capital to beg for forgiveness. However, in the small court meeting that only the central government officials met, Son of Heaven Zhao Zhuan was the first to praise Song Li. He said that he was not in the Guangling army, much less Song Li. The second in command of the secretariat, Zhao Yuling, even said that although Song Li had caused the Guangling war situation to deteriorate, because before Lu Xingxiang entered the border, Guangling temporarily had no power to fight on land. They could only place their hopes on Guangling Prince Zhao Yi's navy. However, in the end, they only lost a small battle to test the depth of West Chu's military power. At that time, the old general Yang Xinxing was also included in the small court meeting. He immediately knelt down and begged for forgiveness, sobbing silently. However, he did not absolve himself. Instead, he said that Yan Jinshuan's death was the fault of him and the old soldiers of Ji province. The emperor, Zhao Zhuan, did not pursue the matter further. Instead, he comforted this old general who had brought shame to the imperial court. He even appointed his eldest son, Yang Huchen, who had lost an arm during the Battle of Guangling, as the deputy general of Ji province, to lead the infantry of Ji Nan, who had been through hundreds of battles not long ago, to Ji Bei, to make up for his father's mistake. After the spring equinox, the 100,000-strong army of Nanjiang had arrived in Xiangzhou. Yan King Zhaobing fell sick along the way and had no choice but to let Crown Prince Zhao Zhu lead the troops. At the same time, General Lu Xingxiang and the old general of the same generation as Yang Xinxing and Yan Jinshuan led the troops on two fronts, a total of 40,000 elites. They worked together with the Nanjiang army to pincer the West Chu rebels. Before this, the Liang imperial court seemed to have used a huge loss of 90,000 casualties and the death of a king to create the fame of Xie Shibian and Ko Jianghuai, these two young men of West Chu. At such a time, West Chu made a sound that shocked the world. After Su Shao, another king of the dynasty, Chen Jibao, wrote a letter to the capital, saying that he had raised 10,000 soldiers and could assist Guangling at any time. Although it was rejected by the Ministry of War. However, the imperial court was still shocked and praised him as the sound of spring thunder. It was enough to see the special position of the white-clothed war saint in the hearts of the people of Liang. It seemed that in Li Yang's eyes, those traitors of northern Liang, such as Chen Jibao, the Confucian Grand Master Yao Baifeng, the imperial relative Yan Jieshi, and Jean Lanting, who was now the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, were all particularly pleasing to the eyes of Tai and city. Within the Beiliang Governor-General House, Su Fengmian and Chu Lushan led a group of Liangzhou border generals to discuss the victory of Xie Shibian and Song Li. This was perhaps the only entertainment of the Beiliang generals during wartime. Huayang Pass Lieutenant Huang Laifu's words were full of disdain. Didn't this Xie family kid learn his military tactics from us? In areas where the battle lines are not fully spread out, he secretly accumulates strength and throws it into the battlefield in batches at critical moments. Our Beiliang frontier army's most observant lieutenants all know this. The only thing he can take out is the MO sword array that he learned from who knows where. But it is still alright to deal with the Guangling cavalry, but against our cavalry, it is the same as the West Chu great halberd warriors of the past. Su Fengmian said, after all, this is the first time since the spring and autumn period that a cavalry on foot has been used. No matter how strong Song Li's cavalry is, we should get a feel of it. Do you have the detailed layout of the MO sword formation? As always, Chu Lushan was looking at the various geographical details on the sand table. Hearing this, he raised his head and smiled. I'm still waiting for news from Fu Shuifang. However, based on the rough losses on both sides, Xie Shibian's Mo sword formation should be much more complete than the great halberd battle formation of the past. I believe that Gu Jintang's Tu Liao side will soon be popularized, and he will have to ask for a large sum of money from the lion of the Ministry of Revenue. The sturdy commandant from Qingyuan Army Town frowned and said, based on the spy report, Xie Shibian and Song Li are not of the same mind. They are both shrewd and cunning, and are very cautious and bold in their use of writing. In the past, I've only heard that Ko Jianghu of West Chu is adept at long-distance raids without regard for the strength of his legs. Even if his overall strength is less than the enemy's, he can still fight with many on the battlefield. Furthermore, he has never defended or besieged a city. He fights as if his infantry can be used as cavalry. It's very chewy. Chu Lushan laughed cruelly. Ko Jianghu is using a string of dazzling victories to tell the world how to fight in the Central Plains in the future. It's no longer as simple as you besiege a city and I defend it. All campaigns have the goal of eliminating the enemy's strength. If you hide in the city like a turtle, I'll find a way to force you out of the city to fight. If you have a large number of troops coming out of the city, I won't fight first. I'll find the right opportunity to defeat you once again. In any case, it's just a quick cut of flesh. 1 to 2 gene of flesh each time. After a few more times, you'll only see the bones. If great ancestor Gu's suggestion of fighting outside the city for the first time was enough to broaden the horizons of the military strategists of later generations, then Ko Jianghui's novel way of fighting is a perfect extension. It can probably be called fighting outside the city to weaken the meaning of the city to the greatest extent. If used well, one can seize the initiative everywhere. Of course, when I was fighting in the hinterland of Beimang, I was already playing like this. It's just that the spearhead wasn't aimed at Liang, so those court officials didn't know how to feel pain. Luya rubbed his chin and said, Guangling Dao finally has a general who understands military affairs like Song Li to support them. That emperor of Liang must have been kicked in the head by a donkey. Just like that, he took him to Tai and city to denounce him. It's obvious that Zhao Yi's navy will also be eaten by Chao Chongqing. Chapter 1426. Su Fengnian shook his head and said softly, purely from the Battle of Guangling, we shouldn't have touched Song Li. But looking at the overall situation, the imperial court's actions that seem to be destroying their own foundations are actually of the same origin. Back then, the spring and autumn 8 kingdoms were destroyed and the generals were given out. Now, the Zhao family wants to gather all the military power in the world so that they can deal with the future war with Beimang. Yang Shenxing and Yan Zhenxuan and the private armies under their command quelling the rebellion were one side of the matter. The Tangxi sword immortal Lu Baijie, the southern expedition commander-in-chief Lu Xingxiang, the Longxiang general Su Gong, the western Liaoning general Tang Taizuang, and the current Song Li, these people entered the capital one after another to become officials. The imperial court intentionally allowed West Chu to revive the country. Other than not expecting West Chu to give them such a big show of strength from the start, everything else happened as expected. Even the king of Yen sending 100,000 troops up north to support was arranged long ago. Don't look at how West Chu cleared out the Guangling battlefield in one go. In reality, he was just helping the imperial court to kill more people. In the end, the imperial court is using this to weaken the vassals and suppress the power of the local generals. It can be considered an open conspiracy. After Luya had cursed the 2 emperors of the Zhao family for not being good people, he immediately smiled at Su Fengnian and said, Your Highness's way of looking at problems is indeed different from us. It's a tall building. What's a tall building? Huang Laifu hurriedly said, Tall building, his mother, I forgot about it. Chu Lushan rubbed his forehead, feeling a little embarrassed. Su Fengnian smiled and said, From a strategically advantageous position. The 2 captains said in unison, Yes, from a strategically advantageous position. Then they each praised, Your Highness is extremely talented. Your Highness is very knowledgeable. Our Bailiang Protector General's eyes seemed a little melancholic. Su Fengnian joked, That's enough, flattery is not suitable for you guys. You guys should just lead your troops into battle. In the future, when we win a great battle, I can flatter you guys without a problem." The entire hall burst into laughter. After Chu Lushan returned to the sand table of Northern Liang and finished discussing the arrangements with the generals, Su Fengnian and Su Fengnian walked toward Chu Lushan's residence. After Su Fengnian walked into the cramped courtyard, he said emotionally, "It's been hard on you." Habitually, Chu Lushan bent over and said with a smile, "Although Lu Qiu has been living a luxurious life all these years, back when she was so poor, she would be overjoyed if she could have a hot steamed bun to eat." Later on, she joined the Su family's army. That was how she gained this fat bit by bit. Wang Yi might not believe it, but Lu Qiu was once as thin as a match. Her entire body added up to about 120 caddies of meat. But at that time, her flesh was firm and she could endure hardships. Su Fengnian really didn't know about this. He looked at Lu Qiu, who was as fat as a mountain. "I can't imagine what you looked like when you were thin." Chu Lushan sighed. "That's right. Even I almost forgot about it." Su Fengnian had specially brought those 2 jars of chess pieces today. Chu Lushan had someone find a finely made Torreya wood chessboard. The two sat across from each other after not seeing each other for a long time. Su Fengnian played white, Chu Lushan played black. They started the game. Su Fengnian lost. Chu Lushan finally won. Because Chu Lushan had waited for so many years. Finally, he didn't have to deliberately go easy. Sitting cross-legged on a large embroidered stool, Chu Lushan looked dazedly at the chessboard. He sighed and said, "Today, I finally know the true depth of His Royal Highness's chess skills." It turns out that Lu Qiu was going easy on him back then, and His Royal Highness had never worked hard. Hearing the somewhat unfamiliar title, His Royal Highness, Su Fengnian became absent-minded for a moment. He sighed and said, "I sent people to Qingzhou to find Lu Su, but the result was disappointing. Lu Su told me that he would rather go to the capital than come to Biyao." Chu Lushan grinned and said, "Everyone has their own aspirations. You can't force them." Su Fengnian grunted and said helplessly, "I heard that Su Xiao had captured many scholars of the spring and autumn period, but most of the people he liked weren't willing to work under him. He could only let them go." Chu Lushan smiled awkwardly and said softly, "Foster father did let them go, but many of them were secretly killed by Lu Qiu, afterward. Among them was the elder of Yuan Baixiong's best friend." Su Fengnian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "No wonder second brother Yuan said he wanted to light your sky lantern." Chu Lushan chuckled. "Unlike Mr. Zhao, I came from a poor background like Mr. Li. I was born to be at odds with aristocratic figures. I don't have Mr. Li's magnanimity. Back then, when I saw those arrogant fellows, I couldn't wait to chop off their heads. Now that I think about it, I should have been more lenient and killed fewer people back then." Su Fengnian was speechless. Chu Lushan twirled a cool chess piece between his fingers and said, "Putting aside the officials of Spring of Eternal Hui, Tangxi Sword Immortal Lu Baijie, head of the Secretariat Qi Yanglong, Imperial College's Left Chancellor Yao Baifeng, Dongyuan Pavilion's Grand Scholar Yan Jieshi, Southern Expedition Commander Lu Xingxiang, Dragon General Su Gong, and so on. These people were invited by Zhao Dun to the capital to fill the vacancy after the collapse of Jianghu. As for Song Kelly and the others, they were chess pieces that Zhao Dun deliberately suppressed when he was alive, so that the next emperor could show his majesty. Then Assistant Minister of the Ministry of War Tang Taizuang, New Chess Saint Fan Changho, Guangling Sek Song Li, Junior Guardian Shen Wang, Ji Province's General Yuan Tingshan, Sun Yin, and Lu Su are the newcomers cultivated by the new Emperor Zhao Zhuan himself." Chu Lushan sneered, "Apart from the unreasonable moves against our Biyao, the other moves are all in line with orthodox chess theory." Su Fengnian sighed emotionally. Zhao Dun must have thought it through carefully before choosing the fourth Prince Zhao Zhuan and not the first Prince Zhao Wu. "We can't deny this. So far, Zhao Zhuan has done a flawless job." Chu Lushan suddenly looked at Su Fengnian with a playful gaze. Su Fengnian rolled his eyes. "Don't get the wrong idea. There's nothing between me and that empress. Do you think that the imperial family of the Zhao clan is blind? Besides, it's not like you don't know that Yan Dongwu and Li Fuzhen are the same. Both of them ignored me back then. To be precise, they saw me as an enemy. Chu Lushan smiled mischievously. Lu Qiu, is just thinking about what's good for her. Su Fengnian scolded with a smile. Do you really think all the women in the world should like me? Chu Lushan put down the chess piece and stretched out both hands, saying with a righteous expression, Your Highness, you don't know, but there are at least 8,000, if not 10,000, young ladies from influential families in the Central Plains who are in love with you. Chu Lushan said leisurely, There's nothing we can do about it. In the 100 years of the Jianghu, there might be quite a few people with peerless martial arts, but there are very few who are handsome and elegant. Counting them, there's only old sword god Li Chungang. Wang Xianji. That old geezer. Tuoba Bodhisattva. A northern barbarian. Dong Tai. It's true that his swordsmanship is profound, but it's a pity that he can't get past his appearance. Originally, Qi Xianzhu and Chao Chongqing could each be counted as one, but one was a Taoist immortal who never entered the world, and the other was a bookworm who only wanted to restore his country. So only Your Highness lived up to everyone's expectations. You went to Liang Lake twice and had countless interesting stories. You also went to Tai and City and became the Grand King of Biyao. You even killed Wang Xianji, and there were countless rare calligraphy and paintings that you identified as fake circulating in the capital and Jiangnan. At the same time, there was the rise of Xueping and Xianyuan Qingfeng, which was equivalent to creating momentum for Your Highness, who had personally visited Mount Hui. How could those ladies not go crazy? It's really like rain after a long drought. Su Fengnian really didn't know that this would happen. He said self-mockingly, If that's the case, then there will definitely be more people who hate our Biyao in the future. Chu Lushan laughed heartily. Of course. Let's not talk about the distant ones. Just take those aunties in Yanji County who don't have to worry about marriage. As long as a matchmaker says which family's man looks a bit like Your Highness, the market will suddenly become hot. Su Fengnian could only laugh it off. After a moment of silence, the atmosphere in the room seemed to change. Chu Lushan suddenly asked seriously, Your Highness, there's something I don't know if I should say. Su Fengnian said, You can ask, but you might not answer. For Lu Qiu, to ask so seriously, it wasn't that Su Fengnian was deliberately mystifying things, but that he really didn't have the confidence to give an answer. As expected, Chu Lushan asked a very tricky question. After Your Highness went to Beimang, especially after returning to Biyao with Su Huainan's head, Lu Qiu, knew that the war with Beimang would be different from what everyone had imagined. So, Chu Lushan must ask Your Highness today, if there comes a day when Your Highness has to make the same choice as adoptive father did back then, what choice would you make? Su Fengnian hesitated. Chu Lushan stared fixedly at him and quickly said, Your Highness knows one thing. When the time comes, the person sitting on the dragon throne in the Zhao family might not necessarily be Zhao Zhuan. It might be that Zhao Zhu who was with Your Highness at Dantong Pass. Su Fengnian didn't say anything. Instead, it was Chu Lushan who asked the question, who continued, If that time really comes, the same choice will no longer be the same situation in the world. Compared to the Su family who had no chance of winning back then, in the future, between the Su family and the Zhao family, at the very least, we will be evenly matched. The general trend is in our hands. The chess game between the two was already set. It was already dead. Su Fengnian took a deep breath and said bitterly, Lu Qiu, I've disappointed you. Chu Lushan slowly lowered his head. Su Fengnian also lowered his head and didn't say anything, staring blankly at the chessboard. At some point, Su Fengnian was still sitting in his original spot. Chu Lushan had already stood up and walked over to Su Fengnian's side. With some difficulty, he bent down and reached out a hand to gently rub Su Fengnian's head. He said softly, Although I'm very disappointed that I didn't hear the answer I wanted, Your Highness. You might have forgotten, but His Royal Highness, when you were young, out of all your adoptive sons, you were the closest to that silly Lu Qiu, I, Lu Qiu, have always been proud of this, happier than winning a battle. If there comes a day when Lu Qiu, who has been alone since childhood, has to give up his 300 caddies of fat on the battlefield, don't be sad. If I, Chu Lushan, have a family in this life, then it's worth it. Chapter 1427. Huda's city was a nail that Beimang's army had to pull out when they went south. Huda's city was huge and lofty. It was known as no other place in the border, no other place in the northwest. It was 4.5 li long from east to west and 5 li from north to south. Beiliang's road took 6 years to build. It was said that half of the dynasty's northwest was used up. Its south gate was called Dingding Gate, which was criticized by the civil officials of Liang. Just on the north side of the Tiger Head city, there were 12 winches and 12 crossbows, with 7 crossbows. The arrows were as big as the rafters of a house, with iron leaves as the feather. The arrows were as fast as thunder, and could reach as far as 700 paces away. At the end of the spring and autumn period, when Gu Jiantang attacked the old southern Tang, he used these crossbows to shoot through the southern Tang Navy's large turreted ships to show the military power of Liang. If it wasn't for these giant ballistae intimidating and restraining them, if northern Mang's infantry were allowed to wantonly push forward the siege weapons, Tiger Head City's defenses definitely wouldn't have had enough strength to spare. Using more than 1,000 stone catapult carts of various sizes to attack a single city, this was something only a madman would do. In history, this had only happened once during the middle stages of Great Feng Dynasty's decline. The city that suffered disaster at that time was precisely Great Feng Country's capital, whose scale wasn't inferior to Great Peace City. Of course, although Beimang's central line had the same number of catapults, the only difference was that the weight of the catapults was 20 to 30 jin more. Therefore, overall, the power of the catapults was far less than that of the attack in the middle of the Feng Dynasty. Huda's city was easy to defend and hard to attack. It also had Liuya and Fuling to help restrain Beimang, so that Huda's city wouldn't follow in the footsteps of Xiang Fan's 10 years lonely city. In addition, there were 6,000 cavalry in Huda's city that could take the initiative to attack at any time. They could also coordinate with the elite cavalry of Liuya and Fuling. The defense line of Huayang Pass was also less than 100 li away from the front line of the 4 towns. All of them were elites of the Beiliang frontier army who dismounted to defend the city. If it wasn't for the fact that northern Mang's central line of defense had sufficient military strength and possessed an absolute advantage in numbers, northern Liang would have launched a large-scale cavalry battle at any moment. Therefore, in the spring of the second year of Xiangfu, Huda's city became the only main character, attracting most of the attention from both sides of Liang Mang. After the Beiliang Protectorate, or perhaps one should say Su Fengnian, personally decided to defend Huda's city to the death for a year, under the leadership of Deputy Administrator Song Dongming and Liangzhou Provincial Governor Tian Peifang, more than 10,000 infantrymen were sent to Liuya and Fuling, 2 towns within Liangzhou. Of these, 4,000 were youths from Liuzhou, carrying a large amount of equipment and supplies. They traveled north, and under the strict escort of the White Feather Guards personally led by Qi Danghua, they entered the 2 towns. For this reason, Beimang symbolically sent out 20,000 cavalrymen to bypass Huda's city and try to intercept them. However, in the end, they didn't fight to the death with the White Feather Guards, and only 2 small-scale battles broke out. After this, Beimang should have guessed Beiliang's strategic intentions, and increased the intensity of the attack on Huda's city. Their siege techniques were mainly derived from the gourd mouth of Yuzhou. However, compared to the simple and crude attack on Huda's city, Beimang attacked Huda's city with a lot of new ideas. In addition to the catapults, the craftsmen of the southern dynasties also created a large number of towed carts for Beimang to fill up the trenches, and flying towers for archers to shoot from high altitudes and destroy the battlements on the city walls. They also tried to build a mountain near the city, and even sent cave masters to explore the terrain, digging tunnels day and night to collapse the city walls or to enter the city. For this reason, Huda's city made all kinds of responses. Beimang's infantrymen were unafraid of death. They rushed forward, wrapped the soil with straw and branches, and threw it into the trenches. Huda's city shot the red-hot iron balls into the trenches and into the crevices of the straw. In the end, the ashes and soil only increased by a few inches, which was far from Beimang's expectations. Huda's city dug trenches inside the city walls and used fire to attack the trenches. Nearly 1,000 Beimang soldiers suffocated in the trenches and died miserably. Tiger Head City had long been prepared for the continuous assault of Northern Mang's 1,000 catapult carts. Lu Jinu's plan was meticulous. He had long ordered people to prepare more than 400,000 earthen blanks, using them to reinforce the city walls before the battle. Even though they were not as sturdy as the original city walls made of rammed earth, they made the catapult carts that Northern Mang had originally used to obtain victory merely look like decorations. When Beimang used the stupidest method to turn the soil into a mountain outside Huda's city, Lu Jinu used his own method to counter Beimang. He dug a tunnel to hollow out the foundation and sank thousands of Beimang's enemy soldiers. When the mountain collapsed and the earth cracked, dust flew everywhere. Even the Huayang Pass Governor General House could see it. Even Chu Lushan, who rarely praised others, could not help but exclaim, "Lu Jinu is good at both offense and defense." As for the Northern Mang high-ranking officers who had suffered enough, towards this Northern Liang famous general whose reputation had long spread far and wide, everyone wanted to eat his flesh even more. After Liuya and Fuling each obtained 5,000 infantry to help defend the city, the light cavalry of the two towns could completely let loose. At the same time, Su Fengnian personally ordered the Xianli Ranch's horse farms in Inner Liangzhou to change or replenish warhorses for Liuya and Fuling, who originally needed to take care of long-distance raids. Instead, they had to focus on explosive power. Su Fengnian and the Governor-General House set a rule for Liuya and Fuling. The next battle was to be separated by 200 miles. As long as they found the right opportunity, they did not need to report to the Governor-General House and could go out of the city to find Beimang cavalry to fight. The only requirement was that they could preserve their main force after the battle, regardless of the outcome. This was an unbelievable military order for the Beiliang Frontier Army. There was actually such a good thing as not being punished after losing a battle? Fu Ling and Lu Ye even went to Huayang Pass to inquire about this matter, fearing that there was a mistake in the transmission of the news. However, the answer they received was positive. Afterwards, when the two cavalry generals met for a discussion, they were somewhat sullen and resentful. They felt that the Prince and Protector General Chu were looking down on the battle prowess of their two garrisons. The 4,000 Northern Mang cavalry were unable to fight to the death, fleeing towards the west. A cavalry officer called Qiyilong Pass, the town commander of the advice army, Wei Liang, told him not to give chase. Wei Liang didn't listen to the advice, chasing after them for more than 30 li, setting up an ambush for the 8,000 Mang cavalry. At the final Qiyilong Pass, at the most crucial moment, he led 500 cavalry to break through the enemy formation, directly charging into the Northern Mang's main banner. Moreover, he vowed to bring up the rear, buying precious time for the Fuling cavalry's main force to withdraw. Qiyilong Pass armor had more than 6 arrows embedded in it, the 500 troops only having less than a single arrow left. In this battle, even though Northern Mang's losses were greater than Northern Liang's, the Fuling cavalry at Liangzhou's second line of defense was almost completely wiped out. Even though there were still 5,000 infantry defending the city, without the cavalry, one of the two wings of the defense line that were originally flying together would be broken. Because of this, Wei Liang went to Huayang Pass to offer a humble apology. However, Su Fengnian did not punish this Fu Ling general. He only promoted Qiyilong Pass, who he had casually thrown into the Fu Ling military town as a junior commandant, to the position of inspector general above commandant and below commandant. He would lead the 1,000 cavalry after the quota was filled and set up the Zhanyan camp. He allowed this camp to increase the number of troops every time it achieved a merit. In the end, the maximum number of troops would be 3,000. This was another major event that attracted people's attention after the withdrawal of the Huluku Infantry Army's Hupong camp and the establishment of the Yuzhou Cavalry's no-retreat camp. Qiyilong Pass, a nobody from Beimang, began to amaze the Beiliang Frontier Army with a single brilliant feat inside the Beiliang Protectorate. Chu Lushan was discussing with the generals whether or not they should transport troops to Huda City. The two sides were arguing fiercely. The focus of the argument was whether or not the huge cost of opening up this road was meaningful. Now, everyone knew that Huda City could accommodate another 15,000 people. The real problem was whether or not they could get in. Luya and Fu Ling's cavalry could only temporarily prevent Beimang from launching a stable offensive in the south of Huda City. This was a world of difference from the Beiliang frontier army boldly supporting Huda City from the south gate. The insistent side believed that the cost of sending 15,000 people into Huda City would be the loss of about 10,000 cavalry. The opposing side insisted that this loss was underestimating Beimang's combat strength and determination. This kind of desperate action was exactly what they wanted. Beimang was worried about not being able to open up the situation. This was the northern barbarians dozing off, and Beiliang was sending them a pillow. When the time came, not to mention losing 10,000 cavalry, even 30,000 people would not be enough to fill up the big hole in the south of Huda City. Then, someone suggested that Fu Ling and Luya should attack at the same time. They should boldly push forward and harass Beimang's army stationed on the Longyan Plain. This would provide cover for the transportation of troops in the direction of Huayang Pass. But soon, someone objected. With the brains of Dong Zhuo and the others, this kind of seemingly well-intentioned but actually bad idea was no different from taking the initiative to greet the northern barbarians. They were afraid that they would not know that Beiliang had made a move. Chu Lushan, whose ears were filled with noise, said calmly, with the reinforcement of Luya and Fu Ling, Beimang must have guessed that we want to use Huda City as a support point. Otherwise, they would not have set a trap for Fu Ling's cavalry a few days ago. Therefore, Beimang is now guessing when we will support Huda City, not if we will support Huda City. There is no doubt about this. When Chu Lushan opened his mouth to speak, the whole place immediately fell silent. Every one of the unruly generals of the border army naturally pricked up their ears to listen attentively. Chu Lushan continued in a neutral tone, then we will strive to find a time when they will not expect to do this. If there is no such opportunity, then we can only not do it. Everyone, Huda City must be defended. But don't forget why we are defending Huda City in the first place. We are defending Huda City not for the sake of defending, but to protect our line of defense in Liangzhou as much as possible. As for the matter of exchanging troops, it is meaningless even if one of our border army's lives is exchanged for 2 Beimang barbarians. Of course, during this period, we can take the opportunity to lure a few Beimang cavalry away from the main army. We can even directly place 15,000 soldiers behind Huayang Pass and not move. However, we can mobilize all the troops on the front line of the grave and launch a large-scale battle that Beimang will never expect. After winning, we can retreat. Chapter 1428. At this point, Chu Lushan tapped his own head with a finger and said with a fake smile, Huda City has Lu Jinu. He will defend the city well. Everyone, other than our 2 legs, we still have the 4 legs of our warhorses to help us run. Don't go down a single path. In the end, right now, we and the Northern Mang army are just staring at each other in the area of Huda City and Huayang Pass. Both sides are scheming against each other, and the only thing left to do is to see whose Dao arts are more unexpected. Although there was no clear conclusion on the matter of Huda City's reinforcements, after Chu Lushan spoke, the generals present had no more objections. After that, Chu Lushan accompanied Su Fengnian for a stroll around the Governor-General Manor. Chu Lushan sighed softly and said, "What a pity. We tried to be clever but ended up making a fool of ourselves." Su Fengnian laughed softly and said, "Perhaps this is what they mean by a man proposes but God disposes. Just treat it as me shooting myself in the foot." Chu Lushan shook his head with a regretful expression. When Su Fengnian gave the military order to Liuya and Fuling, Wei Liang's rash pursuit and Beimang's ambush were all within the Governor-General Manor's expectations. In reality, once Wei Liang's cavalry fell into a desperate situation, they would only last for an hour at most before a long-distance Qingyuan cavalry would join the battle and wipe out Beimang's bait cavalry and subsequent ambushes in one go. However, the sudden appearance of a small governor-general with a sense of danger and the courage to fight to the death destroyed all their plans. Su Fengnian and the Governor-General Manor had no choice but to suffer in silence. This kind of opportunity was like a lost opportunity. Beimang must have thought that Beiliang wouldn't repeat the same mistake and charge into the ambush. Beiliang also lost a great opportunity to set up a trap for Beimang. Chu Lushan suddenly laughed, the Ministry of War and the capital finally remembered to ask us about Beimang's attack. Su Fengnian sneered, just ignore them. If those guys at the border of the Ministry of War dared to go to Gourd mouth of Yuzhou province or come to Huaiyang Pass, I wouldn't stop them from watching the battle. Now that they've *ket off, there's no such thing as lying down and enjoying a good life. Chu Lushan nodded, taking a bit of joy in his misfortune. That mad dog Yuan is now in a difficult situation. Wang Jingchong and Great Ru Shiwei, these two generals, have given him a great victory with both hands. Right now, the entire court is looking down on Northern Mang's military strength with disdain. Yuan Tingshan has also become Ji province's general as he wished. I reckon that Gu Jiantang really wants to hack this son-in-law who only cares about his own promotion to death. The more vulnerable Northern Mang's easternmost battlefront is, the more difficult it will be for our great General Gu to obtain money, provisions, and weapons from the Ministry of Revenue and Ministry of War. When the two Liao brothers said that they wanted to build a 6,000-man Modeo infantry formation, the Minister of Revenue didn't say anything, but the Assistant Minister gave a straightforward answer: I have a life, but I don't have any money. Su Fengnian sighed, looking back now, when Yuan Guo was promoted from the Ministry of Rights to the Ministry of Revenue, which was in charge of the imperial court's purse, it seemed that he was favored by the emperor, but in fact, he was not. Zhao Zhuan's real trusted subordinates were the Ministry of Rights, followed by the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of War. The Ministry of Revenue was only slightly higher than the Ministry of Punishments and the Ministry of Works. When it rains, it pours. Later, Yuan Guo made another mistake when he stood on the side in the small imperial court meeting. The only suspense was whether he or Lu Baijie of the Ministry of War would leave the 6 ministries earlier. Chu Lushan sneered, in the end, it's because the new emperor doesn't trust Gu Lu's disciples from the bottom of his heart. When he changed the Liang edition, he was testing Yuan Guo and the others. Isn't there a rumor that he's going to set up Judici deputy governors in the vassal territories? I reckon that Lu Baijie and Yuan Guo will both have to get out of Tai and city. One will go to Nanjiang to discuss the king of Yan, and the other will go to a newly established vassal. Su Fengnian nodded, there will definitely be someone in Nanjiang. Most likely, it will be Tangxi Sword Immortal, who disappointed Zhao Zhuan greatly and didn't see him as one of his own. Yuan Guo will be relatively better. He will probably go to the king of Han, who has always been at odds with Zhao Zhuan. If his performance is good, Yuan Guo will have a chance to return to the center of the imperial court. Lu Baijie, on the other hand, will definitely have the fate of moving around in the local areas for the rest of his life. Moreover, without the Minister of War, there is bound to be a series of promotions and changes. The imperial court will also be able to appease some of the local generals, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. After all, the posthumous title is only given after death, but the official position in the Ministry of War is real. Chu Lushan sneered, apart from the chaos in the imperial court when the Zhao family of Liang was in a remote corner, there hasn't been such a dazzling upheaval in many years. Su Fengnian shook his head and said, actually, it's not quite the same. The chaos now is only seen as a mess by the common people. In fact, there is order amidst the chaos. The officials in the capital all know what to do. Chu Lushan nodded and said, that's why Qi Yanglong still has some skills. No wonder he's the old guy that Zhao Dun used to replace Bai Yan. Su Fengnian chuckled softly and said, Zhao Zhuan is willing to put Tantanon in an important position. This proves that this young emperor who is busy using his but to warm up the dragon throne hasn't lost his mind. Chu Lushan and Su Fengnian had unwittingly walked to the corridor of the yamen where Yul Wandao had once worked. The two of them stood under the eaves, one with his fingers crossed and the other with his hands tucked into his sleeves. These 2 most important figures in Beiliang standing side by side like this looked rather comical. Chu Lushan gently exhaled and watched the mist slowly dissipate in front of his eyes. He said, the Yuzhou cavalry has produced Yul Wandao, and Xiaoguang city has produced Lu Haojian who has repeatedly performed meritorious deeds. Now, Liangzhou at least has a Chifu Dragon Pass. This is a good thing. I'm just waiting to see which of the 100,000 refugees in Liuzhou will emerge first. And that Hong Yu seems to be pretty good. His temperament is a bit like Huang Fuxi's. This kind of person is born for chaotic times. Su Fengnian helplessly said, Beimang also has people like Zhong Tan. In the future, they will also gradually surface in the general trend. Chu Lushan was just about to speak when a commandant of the White Horse Guards suddenly strode into the courtyard, his expression somewhat strange. He cupped his fists and said, Your Highness, Protector General, there's someone requesting an audience. He claims to be Guangling Circuit's Ko Jianghu. Even Su Fengnian and Chu Lushan couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. What kind of play was this? Chu Lushan smiled and asked, Are we going to welcome him with open arms, or are we going to ignore this famous general of West Chu? Su Fengnian said to the White Horse Guard, Bring him over. Very quickly, a tall and sturdy young man appeared in their field of vision. This also seemed to be tantamount to brazenly barging into the field of vision of the entire Beiliang frontier army. Ko Jianghu, who had entered Beiliang Circuit alone, didn't carry a sword or saber. He also didn't have the scholarly air of a scholar, and he wasn't even as refined as many scholars who traveled to Liangliang. Instead, he seemed more like a local scholar of Beiliang. He looked like the kind of person who had read the sages and could ride a horse to kill enemies. Ko Jianghu shot a glance at the Protector General, who was indeed difficult to not notice. Then, he stared at Su Fengnian and got straight to the point. Su Fengnian, I, Ko Jianghu, can serve Beiliang, but I have a condition. If there comes a day when I have to bring 10,000 Beiliang cavalry to Guangling Circuit, you don't have to worry about what I have to do. Ko Jianghu is confident that I can match up to 10,000 cavalry. Chu Lushan laughed and said, Even those courtesans in the brothels raise their own statuses, but they aren't as thick-skinned as you, Ko Jianghu. If you, Ko Jianghu, were at Guangling Circuit, I would be able to accept 20 or 30,000 cavalry, let alone 10,000. But here, where do you get the confidence to be worth 10,000 Beiliang cavalry? What, is it from fighting Zhao Yi and Song Li? Is it because of the outstanding fighting strength of their cavalry? Are they worthy of carrying the shoes of my Beiliang cavalry? Ko Jianghui's face was ashen. He was still staring at the northwestern vassal king, who was younger than him. Su Fengnian shook his head and said, If you want to use the Beiliang cavalry to break the situation, I won't agree. Ko Jianghu had a mocking smile on his face. I didn't expect that the most powerful vassal king in the Liang dynasty would only have this much courage. You, Su Fengnian, don't know that the more Guangling Circuit makes the Liang imperial court suffer, the more the Zhao dynasty will rely on your northwestern Su family? When the time comes, as long as you, Su Fengnian, are willing to lend me some troops, let's see if the imperial court will dare to use the two issues of censorship and transportation to make things difficult for Beiliang. To say the least, even if I borrow troops, I won't openly use the Beiliang cavalry's banner. To say the least, wouldn't it be more advantageous for Beiliang to change the imperial surname from Zhao to Jiang? Whether it's the princess, Chao Changqing, or me, Ko Jianghu, we're all destined not to be the Zhao dynasty of Liang. Not only will we not be a burden to Beiliang. Su Fengnian said calmly, To be honest, I've thought about this in private when I was bored. I'll grit my teeth and give you 20 to 30,000 cavalry, and you'll take down the Guangling Circuit. But if you want to help West Chu fight for the world, not to mention 20 to 30,000, even 50,000 or 100,000 would be a drop in the bucket. Do you really think that Western Chu's Chen Jibao and Liao's Gu Jiantang are just two wooden stakes? Do you really think that the hundreds of thousands of elite border troops in Nanjiang are just there to watch a play? When the time comes, don't even talk about waiting for your Jiang surname to become the emperor and then fully supporting the Northwest. I'm afraid that Beimang would already be marching south. Ko Jianghu, you said that my vision is not big, and I don't deny it. But your vision is even smaller. Su Fengnian held back his laughter and said, Moreover, your clumsy persuasion, especially this method of not giving up until you've shocked people to death, really isn't very clever. When I, Su Fengnian, roamed Jianghu in the past, I pretended to be a fortune teller and pretended to be a ghost. Every time, I could at least swindle some copper coins. As for you, don't even talk about 10,000 cavalry, you can't even bring one out of Beiliang. Chu Lushan laughed uncontrollably. Ko Jianghu didn't show any anger from embarrassment. On the contrary, he looked somewhat regretful and relieved. This young man stood silently in the courtyard, appearing somewhat lonely and bleak. Su Fengnian walked down the steps and asked, "Do you know why Chao Chongqing didn't let you lead the troops?" Ko Jianghuai said in an indifferent tone, "He felt that I was only a talented general, not a talented commander. He felt that I should be able to see the distant Tai and city and not the gains and losses of the Guangling circuit." This time it was Su Fengnian's turn to be surprised. He asked curiously, "Then what were you thinking?" Chapter 1429. Ko Jianghuai calmly replied, "I only know one thing. With the strength of West Chu itself, so what if we attack Grand Peace City?" Chu Lushan clicked his tongue in wonder. "Kid, you're not stupid either. It's just that compared to the cautious and conscientious Xia Shibian, your Ko Jianghuai's appetite is even bigger." Ko Jianghuai gazed at this small mountain and asked back, "As a general, between the Su Shao who suffered defeat after defeat, and the Yi Baikue who won every battle and was only defeated once in his life, who would you choose?" Chu Lushan nodded. "That makes sense." Ko Jianghuai laughed self-deprecatingly, and then he turned around and left. Su Fengnian did not make a sound even after he had left the courtyard. Chu Lushan whispered, "Are we really going to let this flood dragon slip away?" Su Fengnian softly replied, "Compared to Ko Jianghuai, I still admire the hard-working Xia Shibian more." Chu Lushan grunted in agreement. Xia Shibian is easy to use, but it's hard to say about Ko Jianghuai. Su Fengnian suddenly yelled, "Ko Jianghuai, come in. You're walking so slowly out of the courtyard, who are you trying to impress?" Ko Jianghuai really did turn around and appear at the entrance to the courtyard. Su Fengnian laughed and said, "How many Biyao cavalry you can take away will depend on your own ability. Starting from today, not only Huaiyang Pass, but also the cavalry in Liuya and Fuling towns will be under your command. Excluding Bailiang's losses, however many Beimang soldiers you can kill, I'll give you any cavalry other than the Great Snow Dragon cavalry and 2 groups of heavy cavalry. But let me say this first, those cavalry troops are not for you to use to attack Tai and city. They are just helping you to preserve some of West Chu's vitality. Then you have to bring everyone back here. In fact, you and I both know that Guangling Road is not suitable for you, Ko Jianghuai. Bailiang is just right for you. Do you want to make this deal?" Ko Jianghuai's expression was uncertain. Su Fengnian pointed at him and said, all right. It's just a cheap trick. I, Su Fengnian, am also your senior. You, Ko Jianghuai, have been planning for this since the beginning. I didn't try to bargain with you, so you should be content." Ko Jianghuai laughed. "I'm not good at acting, but you, Su Fengnian, shouldn't take advantage of us for granted. Once West Chu is defeated, it's over. Can you really abandon our princess and not save her? Won't you still have to lead your troops to rescue her? I'm just helping you find a way out." Su Fengnian nodded seriously and said, "Well, it seems like neither of us are good people." Chu Lushan looked at the sudden turn of events and was somewhat speechless. Young people these days. Ko Jianghuai, who was covered in dust, said indifferently, "Is there a place to sleep? I'll sleep for a day and a night first. As for leading troops to kill Beimang barbarians, I'll talk about it after I've had enough sleep." Chu Lushan laughed and scolded, "You're the boss." After Ko Jianghuai was led away, Su Fengnian looked up at the gray sky and fell into deep thought. After walking down the steps, Chu Lushan did not say anything to disturb him. He stood quietly to the side and closed his eyes to rest. After a long while, Su Fengnian said slowly, "Even if Ko Jianghuai uses an alias, it's still hard to say what the pros and cons will be in the future." Chu Lushan was somewhat puzzled. "We don't have to worry about the imperial court. The current situation is pretty much the worst. One Ko Jianghuai can fight against 10,000 cavalry. Actually, that kid isn't bragging. There's Zhou Kong and great ancestor Gu overseeing the front line at Qinghatung, so there's nothing to worry about. But if there really is a big battle at Huaiyang Pass, Huang Laifu and the others won't be able to handle it, so I'll have to personally take the field. With Ko Jianghuai, we'll have a much easier time." "Why do you say that?" Su Fengnian said bitterly, maybe I'm thinking too far ahead. Chu Lushan quickly understood and sighed, it's a bit far. But distant water can't quench a present thirst. Su Fengnian nodded and laughed, that's true. Let's use Ko Jianghuai to deal with the urgent situation first. Chu Lushan hesitated. Su Fengnian patted his shoulder and walked out of the courtyard. Chu Lushan stood in place and muttered to himself, is it because he's afraid that I, Chu Lushan, will really throw 300 caddies of meat onto the battlefield that he agreed to let Ko Jianghuai stay behind? Qingming festival was approaching. At this time of year, there was no rain in Biyao. The morale of Biyao Road was also stabilizing. Liangzhou's Huda city was as stable as Mount Tai, and Xiaoguang city, which was on the verge of collapse, was also defended. The youths of Liuzhou entered the border army one after another, and a general with the surname Ko suddenly appeared above the heads of the two towns of Liuya and Fuling. In name, he was the deputy general of Liangzhou. With Liuzhou's languishing Yuan Saber's illustrious military exploits, Liangzhou's border army was not surprised by this. This also indirectly proved that the young king's control over Beiliang's military and politics was growing. This was definitely not something he could do just because his surname was Su. The Qingming festival was a festival that occurred between the middle of spring and late spring. It was a time when the qi was clear and the scenery was bright, and all things were visible, hence its name. In previous years, Beiliang and the Central Plains had more or less the same customs. Other than the tradition of sweeping the tombs and offering sacrifices to the ancestors, there were also night lanterns praying for blessings, and planting willows to ward off evil spirits. However, this year, Biyao Road's various provincial and county officials had specifically ordered that planting willows was not allowed, and no explanation was given. Qingming Festival was one of the ghost festivals, and it was also the time when willows sprouted and turned green. As a result, the saying, when a willow branch grows on the door, 100 ghosts will not enter the house, was very popular. It was just that many of the troublemakers in Biyao had already left the country, or they had been dealt with until they were docile and obedient. Thus, there was no disturbance or objection to this kind of small matter. In the second year of the auspicious talisman, Liangzhou was bright and clear without rain, and the weather was mild and excellent. However, there was a kind of speechless solemnity in the provincial capital where Mount Qingliang of Liangzhou was located. There were constantly important people rushing into the city with their personal cavalry. Other than the head of the Biyao Protectorate, Chu Lushan, who stayed at Huayang Pass, the commander of the cavalry, Yuan Zuozong, who did not go down south, and the commander of the infantry, Yan Wenluan, who oversaw the border of Yuzhou, the other generals at the border almost all rushed to this provincial capital without exception. Zhou Kong, great ancestor Gu, He Zhonghu, Chen Yinshui, Yuzhou provincial governor Hu Kuei, Yuzhou general Huang Fuqiu, and even the administrator Li Gongda and Lingzhou provincial governor Su Beiji all arrived one after another. This was the first time that Mount Qingliang's royal residence had gathered so many generals after Su Fengnian was overthrown as the king of Biyao. It was an unprecedented grand occasion. The next day was the Qingming festival. 2 riders from the northern border of Liangzhou quietly entered the city under the curtain of night. After entering through the southern city gate, they followed the main street and headed north, heading straight for the legendary Biyao Palace of the Liang Court. The deputy general of Liangzhou, Ko Jianghuai, who used the alias of Ko Beishang, slowly rode his horse. He turned his head and smiled at Su Fengnian. Are there still people going to the royal residence to assassinate you? There shouldn't be. One of the 4 great grandmasters of the world, Su Fengnian. Regardless of whether he is the king of Biyao or not, no one dares to seek trouble. Su Fengnian dismissed it with a smile. Chapter 1430. After getting to know this Ko Jianghuai, Su Fengnian realized that despite this guy's cold and unapproachable appearance, he was actually a chatterbox. Once he started talking, he couldn't stop talking. During their journey together, Ko Jianghuai asked almost everything about Su Fengnian's first trip to Jianghu. On the other hand, Ko Jianghuai never took the initiative to ask about Beiliang's military affairs. Occasionally, when he talked about Guangling's military affairs, which could affect the hearts of the people, he always had a sloppy attitude. This was an eye-opener for Su Fengnian. It turned out that there was such a kind of general between the unparalleled valiant general who could break through enemy lines and the scholarly general who only had a feather fan and a silk headscarf. Ko Jianghu, who had been practicing the sword, had seen that Su Fengnian had not only traveled Jianghu with Li Chungang, but had also interacted with Dong Tai. He wanted nothing more than for Su Fengnian to know clearly what the two sword gods liked to wear and what they ate. Therefore, when Su Fengnian told him the truth about the old man wearing a sheepskin fur coat who liked to pick his feet and dig his ears, Ko Jianghu, who had collapsed on the spot, was silent for about half a day. With great difficulty, he pulled himself together and rambled, "So that's the style of an expert. Not wallowing in the mire with the world, no wonder he could practice the world's best sword. It seems like I also have to wear a tattered fur coat." In the end, when Su Fengnian also said that the peach blossom sword god's appearance was not at all like jade, and that he was actually more approachable than Ko Jianghu fell silent again. When Ko Jianghu had finally finished healing his injuries, Su Fengnian said that he had only practiced martial arts for 3 or 4 years, and that he had relied on luck to become a great grandmaster. This made Ko Jianghu, whose swordsmanship was actually quite good, grief-stricken and completely shut his mouth. When they entered Liangzhou city, Ko Jianghu finally came back to his senses. When they could vaguely see the lights of Mount Qingliang, Ko Jianghu suddenly said as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders, "Although you deliberately made it sound easy, I know that it was not easy for you to have your current glory." Su Fengnian smiled indifferently and said, "If this can make you feel better, then you can understand it that way. Let me make a rough calculation. Since I started practicing the saber and wudang, I started from level 2 master realm to the celestial realm, which is above the earth immortal realm. If I really count, there are 6 realms. It seems that I broke through more than once a year." "Oh right, you are still a master and not at Vajra realm. If you are lucky, 4 to 5 years later, you might be the top expert in the world." Thus, Ko Jianghu stopped talking. When this Liangzhou deputy general entered the majestic palace, he was still sickly. 2 young tiger kuei excitedly ran over to welcome Su Fengnian. The one nicknamed Vajra directly jumped into Su Fengnian's arms. The older sister, Bodhisattva, also intimately bit Su Fengnian's robe. Then, Su Fengnian left Ko Jianghu at Tidehark Lake and took the 2 happy young tiger kuei to Wutangan. The second sister, Su Weisheng, and Lu Qingyan were naturally there. They were busy with the young women who had the reputation of female Hanlin. The second sister only looked up at Su Fengnian and then lowered her head. Su Fengnian walked to Lu Qingyan's desk. What surprised him was that Wang Chudong also had a place in Wutangan. Her desk was right next to Lu Qingyan's. She seemed to be writing a collection of Bailiang heroes that was destined to not be noticed by the literary circle of Liang. When Su Fengnian moved a chair to sit between them, the little girl was still in a daze. Her serious and playful look made Su Fengnian and Lu Qingyan look at each other and smile. Not far away, Su Weisheng finished writing a spy report. She put down her pen, rubbed her wrist, and said softly, "Lu Su will enter the capital in a few days. You should have let me Fengjie and Fan Shaochai kidnap him and bring him to Mount Qingliang. That way, Deputy Administrator Song would have an easier time." Su Fengnian raised his hands and begged for mercy. "Didn't I kidnap Ko Jianghu back? It can be considered as making up for my mistakes." Su Weisheng glared at him. Ko Jianghu didn't come to Bailiang because it was forbidden. However, if Lu Su, who helped Zhao Sun present the plan, came to Tai and city and was used by Zhao Zhuan, it would harm Bailiang. It's a loss. How can you confuse the two? Su Fengnian's face was bitter, but he didn't dare to refute. Lu Qingyan also didn't help him out with words. She just smiled at him. That great writer Wang Dongxiang, who was slow to realize that Su Fengnian was sitting very close to him, was so frightened that he leaned back and fell back with his chair. Su Fengnian gently reached out and pulled the chair back to its original position. Wang Chudong, who had made a fool of himself, was ashamed and seemed to want to find a place to hide, like a panicked little fox. Su Fengnian made a face at her. She immediately smiled brightly, her eyes narrowed into crescents and her cheeks dimpled. Su Fengnian said with a smile, don't be too tired. Remember to strike a balance between work and rest. You can also practice the Wudong Mountain Fist technique when you have time. Su Weisheng said unhappily, don't just stand there and talk. Su Fengnian carefully rolled his eyes at Lu Qingyan and Wang Chudong. The Wutongan maids at the table couldn't help but secretly laugh. Su Weisheng was about to continue lecturing when Su Fengnian hurriedly stood up and said, I'll go to Teacher Song's place to take a look. Looking at the king of Biyao who ran away with the 2 tiger kuei, the atmosphere in Wutongan unconsciously relaxed a lot. Su Fengnian's treatment at Song Dongming's place and Wutongan's side was of course like heaven and earth. Now, the officials who served as the subordinates of the deputy administrator were mostly outstanding young scholars in Biyao. They each had their own strengths. However, compared to the younger generation of Jianghu who worshipped and envied Su Fengnian's identity as a great master, these scholars were more in awe of Su Fengnian, the leader of 300,000 iron cavalry, after in-depth understanding of the current situation in Biyao. Therefore, when Su Fengnian and Song Dongming who was taking a break from the busy drinking tea, these young people were all paying attention to the young king's every move. Song Dongming held the teacup that Su Fengnian had personally brewed and poured tea for him. He was not in a hurry to drink tea. He was only using it to get rid of the spring chill. He said softly, all the scholars who went to Liangliang have arrived. The family members of the soldiers who died in battle have also arrived. There are certainly some rumors among them. I hope you don't take it to heart. Su Fengnian nodded. Some of the rumors were the same as many people who heard that he had gone outside the Calabash Gate and felt that he was showing off his bravery. Su Fengnian really did not want to pay attention to them. Some of them were extremely bitter and sobbing. Su Fengnian did not dare to listen to these. After chatting about Beiliang's government affairs, Song Dongming stood up and walked out of the room with Su Fengnian. This middle-aged man who was once groomed by Yuan Benshi as the prime minister hesitated and said, in the past, I wanted to be the administrator so that it would be easier for me to show off my skills. After getting along with Li Gongda, I feel that I still hope that he can continue to be the administrator. I am in Liangzhou and Sir Li is in Lingzhou. It won't be a problem. Su Fengnian nodded and said, since Sir Song has said so, then there is no problem. Song Dongming stopped and said with a smile, I still have a lot of business to take care of. I won't see you off. Su Fengnian smiled and said, of course. Song Dongming said to Su Fengnian's back, in the past, I only knew that Biyao was a place where martial artists used soldiers. Now, Song Dongming and many scholars have discovered that Biyao is also a place where scholars can write. I want to thank you on behalf of these people. Su Fengnian turned his head and smiled happily. Song Dongming suddenly blinked and tried hard to hold back his smile. He said, Your Highness, there are a few women of the younger generation in the Song family. They are all virtuous and have written to me. They said that even if they steal, they want me to send back a few small items such as your seals and copybooks. The most courageous one has always wanted to travel the Jianghu and be a heroine since she was young. She said that it would be best if I sent her a piece of your clothing. If I didn't send anything back, she would cut ties with me, her uncle. Su Fengnian rubbed his forehead awkwardly. Song Dongming laughed heartily and said, I don't care about the clothing. Your Highness can just casually write 4 or 5 characters and send me a few copybooks. On the night before Qingming festival, Su Fengnian sat alone on the top of the mountain. He watched the city lights at the foot of the mountain gradually light up and then extinguish. He finished a jug of green ant wine.